So now we enter the public session, and there should be a time delay because I'm supposed to tell people in the public gallery something. So I'll just wait till there's people in the public gallery because I don't like speaking to an empty bench, you know. Okay. Okay. It's really just this business about switching mobile phones to silent and turning off 3G and 4G connections. People are welcome to use their devices on Wi-Fi, etc. So, I want to seek your agreement to adopt the revised agenda. I'm learning that the agenda be set, but then be revised with various developments. So, we'll adopt the revised agenda. We'll accept that. Is that okay, members? Agreed?
That's great.
And then moving on to apologies. Apologies so far. I have apologies from Sandra Overend and David Hilditch. Are there any other apologies that members are aware of?
I assume my colleague should be along, but no.
Okay. And then I'll move into what's termed chairperson's business. The very first thing I'd like to do is to welcome Ms. Jennifer McCann. Welcome, Jennifer. Jennifer Falcher Road, you're very welcome to the committee, and to record our committee's appreciation of Katrina Ruan's short service to the committee. It was brief, and I certainly observed that she was a former education minister. She knew her stuff, so I don't know whether to be pleased or displeased. But anyway, thank Katrina Ruan for her service to the committee, and welcome, Jennifer. Okay, moving on then. I want to refer to recent press reports which indicate that the department is apparently to reverse a decision relating to the funding of nurture units in some Irish medium schools. Now, this was raised in the House, as they say, by some members, you know, not with the status of this committee, but by some members. And I suppose I would like to indicate some concerns. And I'm a bit worried too that we deferred the Corley and the Gael Scolaíocht briefing, but we did that with their agreement, with their consent, you know, because we had to streamline the business for today. Suppose I'm seeking members' views on the possibility of an additional meeting. Some members come to me privately and say, we think there needs to be an additional meeting. This area hasn't been reached properly. That area hasn't been reached properly. So I'm seeking members' views on organising an additional meeting to discuss this important issue. Now, if members don't want to go down that road, then I would suggest that a delegation of interested members meet with Corley and the Gael Scolaíocht next week, ahead of the formal introductory meeting. And the reason I'm doing that is because a number of issues have arisen, and there's considerable amount of lobbying. And I don't want to send a message to the Irish private sector that they're a poor relation in any way. So that's me stating my case. Okay, Jennifer?
Yeah, I mean, I would support you in that. I think that first of all, I mean, and I was the one that asked the question in the chamber yesterday. This is the second decision that has been made that has affected the Irish medium sector in the period when the new minister has came into post. There was another Gael School that the development plan in my own constituency in West Belfast that was progressed quite well, and it was overturned. So I'm very, very concerned, particularly that these two nurture units. I have seen nurture units firsthand, and the support that they give to children that need that wee bit of extra support, and also to their families. And I think this was the first two that was ever put in the Irish medium sector, and I think it's very, very important. It sends, in my opinion, a very wrong signal out to people who want their children educated by Irish through Irish medium and to the Irish medium sector as a whole from the Education Minister. And to be honest with you, and I'll bring it up when we go in more detail to the June Monaghan. I mean, yesterday when I asked him in the chamber, he seemed to be referring that it was the fault of June Monaghan, but it's very, very clear that should have come out of the departmental allocation that he had already got as part of his budget. because that it isn't a vast amount of money, and I would be very, very strongly suggesting that we ask him to overturn his decision to reinstate the funding for these 2 nurture units.
I suppose there's a general committee aspect to this as well, in the sense that, is this the only sector that doesn't have nurture units in place? So suppose if I was trying to generalise it, you know, beyond the specific of 1 or 2 schools, I'm just making that point. But do members have any views? Okay, Colin first, Catherine and Chris have indicated.
Chair, I think of just following on from the point that you've made, I think that it's, you know, I support wholeheartedly the remarks that have been made, not least because somewhere in the communication this school has felt that these schools felt that they have got this money, that they've went out and actually allocate those resources. They've employed people on the strength of the communication that they've received, and then to receive communication the other way around then it has left people in very, very difficult situations, and that's totally unfair, and I think we need to find maybe that out. But in terms of the committee, I do think we need to look at the issue of equality, and equality across all the sectors, because it's very clear that we're maybe letting some sectors down and not others. And so far in this first 6 or 8 weeks that we've had at this committee, we've been dealing with what appears to be inequality in the special needs sector, and now we're dealing with inequality in the Irish language sector. So I think we need to just to be careful about that and to try and investigate that to see that there is a level playing field.
Okay. Catherine?
Thank you, Chair. And just to concur with all the comments that have been made so far, I attended the protest outside the front yesterday morning, and I mean, just to see the children who were just devastated that they felt that it was an attack on their school, and certainly I would have grave concerns around the last number of weeks and decisions being made around special school, preschool provision, and indeed within the Irish language sector. I think it's incredibly important that we don't wait to September to meet again, that we do invite Corla and Gail Scullichta here, because they were due to attend today. They haven't got their slot today, and I think it's important that they do get that before September. Equally as important as that, I note in our papers that it says that we will return to look at the special school preschool provision in September. That's simply not good enough. September is too late. I am still being contacted by parents of children who want to go to Fleming Fulton, by the principal, by staff who have a nursery sitting ready to go with no children being admitted. So I think it's critically important that we meet and that we deal with those outstanding issues as a matter of urgency.
Okay, Chris, Deputy Chair.
Take that in reverse order there, Chair. Wholeheartedly support what Catherine has said there. I think the committee may need to give consideration to meeting next Wednesday on those matters, but putting that aside and dealing with this particular issue, it's my understanding, Chair, that a room was fitted, staff were employed, children were assessed, places were allocated, families were notified, and the nurture unit was ready to commence in September, only to be pulled in what is almost July. Now, regardless of sector, that is unacceptable process in my opinion, and I do think we should be seeking a urgent action from the Minister in relation to that issue.
Okay.
We as I've said previously, and people have disagreed with me, it was welcome for the Minister to attend at such an early stage, but it was such an early stage that these types of issues we weren't across the detail of, and we weren't able to have a robust exchange with him. And there are a lot of issues now raising that I don't feel like his response to them has been adequate.
Rosemary?
Yeah, in relation to the nurture units, I would actually like to see where these nurture units, I'm new in the committee and etc, and I'd just like to see just throughout Northern Ireland where these nurture units are, and I'm wondering if it's possible to have that information supplied, so
Maybe
that
some information on the benefits of nurture units in
well,
mainstream schools.
yes, and
all kinds of schools.
where exactly they are throughout the province.
Okay. Okay. Any other member wish to come in on this? There's a
Chair,
request
could
here.
you indulge me, please?
Yes.
Just and apologise for me. I got held up by a camera crew out there.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we're essentially discussing the possibility of an additional meeting of the committee next week to look at 2 issues. There's a development situation here where we would look at 2 issues. One is regarding the fact that Irish medium schools do not have nurture units, and there was planning and there was a lot of planning and a lot of preparation being done in 2 particular schools following the awarding of funding to both schools for nurture units. So there's kind of dissatisfaction in some quarters about that, and trying to get to grips with that one. And then secondly, there's this whole business of the Education Authority, and should we wait to September before we have another look at special schools preschool provision? So there's a suggestion from more than one member, from more than one party, that we do have an additional meeting next week to look at both of these issues. And we're taking into account, Morris, that Corley and Gael Scoliachta, the umbrella body for Irish medium education, were kind of bumped off the agenda today, you know, with their consent, you know, for a more comprehensive introductory briefing in the autumn, you know, to accommodate what we're doing here with the June monitoring. So there is a suggestion, perhaps a proposal, that we have an additional meeting next week. Now, we'll discuss the schedule in that if we agree to it. If we don't agree to that, then we'll maybe have some sort of informal meeting, but there is a request for an additional formal meeting to address two issues.
Chairman, thank you for that. Where do we stop these special meetings? I suspect there's not a member in this committee or in that assembly but hasn't got a special issue that they feel merits a special meeting of committee. Now, if we go for a special meeting here, and I might say that per se I'm not opposed to such proceedings. However, I do have reservations. Where do you stop this? Why is it that we can't make the decision? I understand in relation to the funding for the Irish medium, the funding was never there in the first place. Now, this was a decision of the previous minister, which he's entitled to do. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be doing that. But that was his decision. And I suspect then when you make decisions like that, there's a responsibility upon you to say, well, here's how it's going to be funded. But that didn't happen. And now, when the books have been looked at, my reading of it is that there is no funding there. And if we were to have a special meeting today or next week or next month or whenever this might be, that funding is still not there. I don't know how the special meeting can bring the funding to it. Now, and I accept there are those around the table here who feel that they have a responsibility perhaps to go the second mile to ensure that all explorations have been done, and I can understand that. But the reality of the situation is this is a finance problem.
Okay,
That's
Philip?
my reading of it.
Yeah, okay, Philip?
Thank you, Chair, and I totally concur with what Morris has said. It is a finance issue, and I think that is the bottom line here. I think, to be fair to the Minister, I think it was the second sitting we had in the Chamber, we talked about the hours for special early years special needs, and the Minister was reluctant to commit to that because it wasn't. He couldn't commit to the finance long term. And I think it's important, and there is a responsibility on ministers to look at the long-term viability of things. And there have, and we're all aware of different projects throughout the years, like, for example, the Signature project, which was a fantastic initiative, but had to be pulled because of a lack of funding. And I think when we look at these programmes, there has to be long-term viability in them. We have to look at things through a long-term lens. I don't believe that was done in this case. It was pulled as a matter of funding, which I understand was as a recommendation of the Department of Education. It wasn't a solo run by anyone. This was looked at, and on the basis of funding, available funding, it was pulled.
Okay, Philip, thank you. Jennifer?
Yeah, I think this issue is different. I think that it's not just an issue about funding. I think it's an issue about process and how, first of all, it was done. That the two schools were told that they were getting the nurture units. They were preparing for the nurture units in September. They had bought equipment out of their own school budget and equipped the nurture units. They had told the families and the children that that was going into the nurture units, and then they had been told by a phone call on Friday afternoon past that they weren't getting the money. The money being a problem about the budget, I was aware, or I have been advised that the Minister had applied in June monitoring, but in my opinion, it should have come out of his educational allocation budget, that he had the allocation. And I think process, but there's also an issue about equality here, because there are no nurture units in any Irish medium sector right across the north, not one. These were the first two. And why were these two particular ones picked, if you like. So I think that there's two issues here, the process of how it was done and an equality issue. So I think in terms of that, I think that there is a need for another meeting. And I know Kat has already said about the special educational needs, and she's more across it than I am. But people will be expecting those places in September. We can't wait till September to have another meeting, in my opinion.
Catherine, then Colin.
Yes, well, it was just that Lord Morrow wasn't here whenever we were discussing the other items, and he's really referred to just one. And just to concur with Philip, that I would love to see the return of the signature project, and indeed have questioned the Minister and the Executive Office on that recently. But we have postponed a presentation from Corlin Gael Scullicta today, and I think they had to serve their hearing. But more importantly, what really struck me when I read the papers was that we would return to the issue of special school preschool provision in September. That is just not good enough, given the fact that the school term starts in September. So it isn't just one issue that we need to discuss, although I have serious concerns around the equality relating to the Irish language sector following that decision, and I think that's important to discuss. But there are still two outstanding issues that need to be discussed before I would be comfortable going into recess.
Colin.
Yeah, and it's just in support of that, because I think maybe if the member Morris would accept that it's a different situation here. We had a minister that set forward a plan, then there was a change of minister, and then there was a June monitoring, and then we've got to the end of June, and this impacts something that's going to happen in September. I have no doubt, and in fairness to him, that if this was Minister O'Dowd, he wouldn't have accepted a lack of funding in the June monitoring round from that. He would have fought for that, and then there would have been a change in priorities to try and do that. And I think it's the change of different ministers, different priorities, different June monitoring that's led that, and that's the unique situation that they're in. This doesn't open the door for all the other cases of everybody else. And then also, and I know there's pressures on everybody's budgets, but whenever you look at the amount of money that there is for education, and we're talking about £70,000 here, we're not talking that we're needing to relocate Belfast to South Armagh. So we're talking 70 grand to give equality, and on that issue I think it's imperative that we meet.
Okay, I have to bring this to a conclusion now. This aspect of the meeting, this part of the meeting, and do members agree that there will be an additional meeting? That's the issue that's being put to the meeting.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Okay. Is there a proposal then, or okay?
I'll second that.
Sorry, Chairperson, just for procedural correctness,
Yeah.
there's no need for seconders.
No need for seconders.
Usually how motions come to the committee is the chair gauges members' opinion and he will put the motion and the members vote accordingly.
Well, as I read it, there is a proposal that there is an additional meeting of the committee next week, and that it will address two issues. Nurture units in Irish medium sector and special schools preschool provision with the Education Authority. Okay. All those in favour, please show
So the
their...
preschool, sorry, Chair, before you take the vote. The second one that you mentioned,
Yep.
does it have to be decided by September?
Yes.
Is there a timeline there?
There's a
Johnny,
strong
you need to
feeling...
look all confused, or we know what your agenda is.
There's a strong feeling of
School
urgency.
year starts in September, doesn't
the
it?
school year starts in
so
September, Chair. I think,
September.
and that's just a delay in
This
tactic.
vote's going to be in favour of holding
Yeah.
the meeting, so you
So
can
let's
go to
just
the
do the
vote.
vote.
That's Stephen through, Chair.
Okay, so those in favour of the
We'll have to get
additional
through
meeting,
to
those in favour of the additional meeting, raise their hands.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in ayes and noes.
Those opposed?
2, 3, no
Okay.
abstentions.
Okay. And in relation to the scheduling of the meeting, can we tic-tac, is that the way to do it, or?
Well, Chair, we've been anticipation that something like this might happen. We talked to CNG, they could come on Thursday afternoon, and we're trying desperately to contact EA. We've been at this for a couple of days to see if the Education Authority, to see if they could make themselves available. So the suggestion would be that it would be Thursday 2 p.m.
Philip, that doesn't suit you?
I'm not in the country. Sorry, Chair.
But okay.
Doesn't suit me. I already have meetings lined up for the next Thursday.
I mean, not have it Wednesday.
Okay, Wednesday afternoon would work for me as distinct
Yeah,
from the morning.
Wednesday.
That's how it would fit me.
Okay, Wednesday afternoon.
Okay.
Morris?
No, Chair, it doesn't suit because I have another schedule.
Is there, Chair, sorry to be awkward, but is there any reason why it can't be the normal time on Wednesday?
Well, would the normal time suit then?
Chairman, I went away and made plans thinking that we're
I did too,
about
but
next week free, but anyway.
Wednesday 10 a.m. then,
Is that,
Chair?
only if that's not, is that okay for people?
is Wednesday 10 a.m. any different for anybody than Wednesday at 2 p.m?
Is that right?
I would prefer 2 p.m. if it could be achieved on this occasion. Colin's nodding
Yeah.
affirmatively too.
Whatever,
Okay.
either suits me.
Can we agree that, Chris?
Yeah, this needs to happen, so
Okay.
I'd have to, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Now, there is a lot on. Next, I'm moving till the subject of conductive education. It's really item 2.3 on the agenda. I want to inform members that I, but not only I, am sure other members did too, met informally with representatives of a particular school which uses a conductive form of education to help children with cerebral palsy and other conditions. The school has written to the committee and the letter is in tabled items, blue tab. Other items from the school were emailed to members variously on Tuesday, as I understand it. This thing about the committee not becoming involved with individual schools, I have to state that. But I do want to seek members' agreement to write to the Department of Education and/or the Education Authority, seeking their views on the conductive form of education and their general policy approach to school-based health therapies and cooperation between independent and special schools. Is that agreed?
Yep.
Okay.
Chair, just to supplement it, I'm learning about this particular provision and particular school. It's helpful in their correspondence that they allude to, they refer to a resolution, I presume it was an Assembly motion, that said that the Assembly supports conductive education and commends Buddy Bear Trust School Dungannon to the Office of First Minister and Deputy First Minister and the Minister of Education for financial support and assistance. So I didn't catch everything you were saying there, but are we asking in,
I think that
in
motion
plain
was,
language?
the motion was in 2008.
It was some time ago, but are we asking in plain language whether financial support is available, or is that?
Okay, Peter?
Chair, to clarify, the school in question has been, I emailed members some information about it earlier in the week. So the school in question can be, the Education Authority can send children there. And if that happens, then the authority is obliged to cover the associated costs. It happens, though, that there have been very few, I think about one child in the last mandate, and I think possibly none in the previous mandate, that have actually been referred to the school in question. So the question that the committee has agreed is that they will write to the Education Authority and DE about conductive education. What's their view on conductive education? What's their view on, because there are a number of these school-based therapies connected with autism and other things. So it might be interesting for the committee to understand that. And also in terms of that particular school, there was a recommendation from an ETI report that there be cooperation between that independent school and the local special school. So rather than, as the chair indicated, getting involved in an individual school situation, the committee follows its proper role and looks at the policy. So the policy issue is about what are you going to do about school-based health therapies, and what about cooperation between independent schools and special schools that provide some of these therapies.
Okay, could we maybe qualify it slightly and just ask in what way they support conductive education, just to try and get some sort of response that addresses the wider situation of financial provision or support for that type of education if we do need to avoid individual cases now.
Okay. Rosemary?
Yeah. You referred to one child going within the last mandate, etc., to the school. Who exactly refers these children to that school, and why are there so few referrals?
I think, Chair, the answer will probably come from the Education Authority, because that's what we're asking, is how do you actually support access to these therapies? The answer is child with special educational needs gets a statement.
Yes.
And it's, as you know, a former teacher, what am I talking about? Right, okay, so it's the Education Authority, that's who decides. So they will then write on the statement, the child should get the following support. They might indicate which school that should happen at. So that's where that would come from.
Morris?
Chair, yeah, it is disappointing that there's only been one referral. And I think that to some degree cloaks the valuable work that this particular school is doing. And I'm not saying that just because it's in Dungannon. I suspect others here have visited the school, they've seen it firsthand exactly what the service and everything is provided, and they do a magnificent job. And they merit, in my opinion, what support that we can possibly give to them. And I would hope that the committee would adopt a positive response towards this. And I see there that they refer to in the letter that's in front of us here, the inspection report recommended the Buddy Bear Trust, the Education Library Boards and Department of Education, Special Education should explore the possibility of collaborative working. And I think that's a good statement. And I think it's from that angle, Chair, that we should approach this.
Okay. Catherine?
Yes, Chair, and just to concur with comments made by Lord Morrow, I mean, again, we have a school that can provide special care to children, the most vulnerable children, and we're not using it properly. Similar, we have a nursery in Fleming Fulton that we're not using properly. It raises serious concerns, and I'm happy that next week we're going to have an opportunity to raise those, hopefully, with the Education Authority, but just really adds weight to the concerns that we already have.
Okay. And Colin, finally?
Just finally, again, issues of equality. As I understand, some pupils that attend this school don't get the uniform grant, and they would if they go to other schools. So I think there is an overwhelming issue of equality within our education sector to make sure that everybody gets the same opportunities and the same help and assistance.
So we're going to adopt the course of action here of writing to the Department and the Education Authority as agreed. Okay, thank you, members. Okay. I want to remind members that I met informally, accompanied by the clerk, with representatives of the Northern Ireland Teachers' Council, teaching unions body. That happened yesterday. And we discussed, Rosemary, you always made a good point. You made a good point. What did you discuss? We discussed the need for budget certainty for schools, concerns relating to school inspection, lack of support for communities in the area planning process, the need for clarity in respect of shared education projects, lack of teacher development, professional development support nowadays, and budget pressures relating to special educational needs. And I suggest, that the committee will consider these issues in September when we discuss our strategic plan. But very often, a meeting of that character, informal with the chair and clerk, can precede a presentation later to the wider committee. So members may wish to bear that in mind. Okay, and moving on. 2.5 item, committee input on FOI matters, freedom of information during summer recess. And maybe I'll ask you to interpret that, Peter. What are we getting at here?
So, Chair, this is to inform members that it's normal practice for committees to delegate authority to the Chair and Deputy Chair during periods of recess to submit views on the releasing or withholding of information in any non-routine or contentious FOI requests received to the committee. In the previous mandate, at the final meeting of each session, the committee agreed to this delegation of authority, and the committee would be advised of any such requests, views expressed by the Chair and Deputy Chair, and the response issued by the FOI unit at the first available meeting following the recess period. In the 7 years I've been at Clark, we've never actually used this delegation. We haven't received a contentious FOI request during summer recess, but it's just a procedural.
I then have to seek members' agreement whether or not we continue with this practice.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Item 3, draft minutes of the meetings, last meeting, 15th of June. Refer members to the draft minutes of that meeting at page 6 in your electronic pack. And I want to seek members' agreement that the minutes are indeed a complete and accurate record of proceedings. Is that agreed? Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. And then moving into matters arising, I want to refer members to matters arising at page 13. There are 2 items. The first refers to preschool provision in special schools The second, on June monitoring, well, we're going to deal with that by a departmental briefing. But the first refers to preschool provision in special schools, and kind of we've dealt with that. And that it's going to be this is item number 2
right, Chair.
in the meeting of next week.
Just a couple of quick points.
Okay, of course.
There's a correspondence here from the Education Authority from Gavin Boyd, Chief Executive, to the committee, addressing some of the points that we raised. Point 1 states that the Education Authority has already sought and agreed representation for the pre-consultative professional practitioner group from special schools principals. Now, the professional practitioner group and the parents group were seen as 2 key ways for them to address the totally inadequate engagement and consultation that they had undertaken to date in this issue. I would be quite concerned that they appear to have already sought and agreed representation for the professional practitioner group when of the number of schools principals that I've spoken to, none seem aware of this. So I would be quite eager that they provide us with more detailed information as to which principals will be and professional practitioners will be on that group. And that leads me into when exactly that will meet. They say it will convene at the beginning of the 2016-17 academic year. Why? What is stopping it from meeting immediately?
Well, do we have an opportunity then, Chris, to raise that during the oral update next Wednesday afternoon?
Yeah, the other in regards to the parents group, it says parents who have a particular interest in contributing to this work as part of a pre-consultative stakeholder group will be sought. This will also be established in 2016-17 academic year. As we know, there is a extremely representative parents group already formed. Again, why are they not meeting with them immediately? One other quick concern, Chair. Again, the language is extremely concerning. Point 5 in the letter says 6 schools have made a reduction in the number of full-time places. Yeah. This is defined as a placement that was previously 4 hours or longer. These schools include Knockevin, Ardnashee, Brookfield, Parkview, Harberton and Greenwood Assessment Centre. I would question whether those schools would be comfortable and or agree with the language that states 6 schools have made a reduction. One of the key questions I asked the Education Authority previously, Chair, was had the 6 schools that are being reduced been engaged with? And the response I received was they are aware, maybe not word for word, but they are aware of their statutory responsibilities. That does not suggest open engagement, good, clear communications, and indeed it's my understanding that those 6 schools would, well, at least some of those 6 schools would prefer to be able to offer full-time provision rather than reduced hours. So this is more communication trying to shut down an issue that is clearly more complex than the Education Authority for presenting, and as you say, that can be engaged with next week. But those are some serious ongoing concerns in relation to how the Education Authority is communicating on these issues.
Okay, obviously we're going to deal with this in detail.
Fair enough, Chair.
Next week.
Yep.
And I appreciate your points, Chris. Catherine and Jennifer want to make brief points. I know they do.
I'll make it very brief, Chair, and it's just striking a comment a parent made to me, not in relation to Fleming Fulton, but another special school, and it is around this issue of equality. If your child does not need to go to a special school for preschool, they'll get the full 4 hours. But if they do need to go to a special school for preschool provision, they won't. So again, we have an issue of equality that the Education Authority, in my view, aren't addressing.
Okay, and Jennifer?
I totally concur with the remarks made by the 2 members, but can I also just want to add, because and obviously I'm coming into the committee today for the first time, but I have been made aware that even aside from this particular issue, that there's issues in schools in general where cuts have been made to classroom assistants and children that need. So I'm just wondering, do we have a clear picture of what way this is all going in terms of children that need? Obviously this is a particular issue and we'll be discussing it, but in the whole general picture from the Education Authority, because I'm being told that they're cutting hours for kids that have, needs in schools, primary schools, right across the board. So I'm just wondering, you know, where their heads are at in all this, because it seems to me it's again the most vulnerable children that's being impacted on here.
Do you have an opportunity to raise that next Wednesday? Or
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, obviously this is the main issue, but I mean, if we can raise that as well.
Okay,
then-
no problem, thank you. And Colin, finally?
Just two quick points, Chair. I think we do need clarity because, again, the sector seems to be providing us with information that maybe the information we were being presented with at the committee wasn't entirely accurate, and I think that we would need to be assured of that. And also, again, the sector seems to be providing us with solutions. I know many members probably got a list of all the available spaces that are available, and yet the actual authority can't come to us with that information. So I do think we need to get clarity as to why the sector and the parents have to come up with solutions whenever the paid officials can.
Okay. So we're going to try and address the issues. We're not necessarily meeting individual schools at this time on this matter, but we are going to address the issues during that oral update on Wednesday afternoon. Is that right? Is that agreed, members?
Yeah, I think, Chair, just very briefly, as Colin says, obviously as part of this item, there is correspondence proposing alternative ways to address the wider issue of apparent over demand in relation to special educational needs nursery provision. I think it, without individualising the issue, it would be good if the Education Authority were prepared in advance of next week to speak to why some of the alternative solutions that have been put to them in detail, to respond to those, to say whether or not those can be taken forward. Closing the issue down for the summer isn't acceptable. There are groups that they are establishing that can be immediately met with, and there are proposals here that we need a much better response to whether or not they can be alternative solutions. I think they need to be prepared to answer that in detail next week. Anything less is not acceptable.
Wednesday's meeting is hopefully disallowing them from closing it down for the summer.
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay,
Yep.
We're agreed on the way forward then, thank you. Agreed. Okay. Now, moving on, members, to item 4.2 on the agenda, June monitoring round. I want to advise you that that's obviously going to be our first briefing today. So I will ask the clerk to speak ahead of the June monitoring round team coming into the room.
Sorry, Chair.
I think you're going to refer to the green tab.
I think I probably am. Well done, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I understand what's going on. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just a moment of panic there when my table pack said one thing, meeting pack said the other. Of course, they're different because this is a new agenda item. So thanks, Chair. I refer members to the green tab, as you correctly predicted, in tabled item, which includes 2 responses from the department, 1 from the Minister in respect of June monitoring. There's also a covering note that I updated yesterday evening. Additionally, you are provided with, because the officials might refer to it, this is the 2016-17 budget document. And if you can ask officials to come in, Chair, if you're content.
Yep.
Marvellous.
Okay, can I extend a welcome on behalf of the committee to the Department of Education team who are going to address the issue of June monitoring round. And I'll hand over straight away to Trevor Connolly, who might introduce his team and make a presentation, 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay, Chair. Chair of Event is Gavin Patrick on my left, Deputy Finance Director, and Stephen Cray from the Investor and Infrastructure Directorate in terms of capital. Chair, in terms of opening statement, mine's really quite short. One, just to thank the committee for the opportunity to brief on the June monitoring outcomes. As always, we're here to help the committee and answer the committee's questions as best possible. The Minister wrote to you on the 24th of June, and really I've nothing further to add other than obviously take whatever questions you and the members may have. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to throw it open to members straight away. Just, okay, any member wishes to indicate early in the process. Jennifer?
Yep. There was some discussion earlier in the meeting, and also there has been some discussion since Friday On Friday, we had 2 schools through the Irish medium sector who had been previously told they would get funding for nurture units. And they went and they bought the equipment for the 2 nurture units, and they trained staff, and they got parents and the list of children's names and that. On Friday afternoon, they got a phone call from the department to say that they basically hadn't got the funding. Now, when I asked the Minister yesterday in the chamber about this issue, he indicated that it was because he had made a bid in June monitoring and didn't get the money in the June monitoring. So the first question is, what was that bid that he made for the nurture units in particular? And secondly, given that it's such a small amount of money, I can't remember what you said it was, Colin, but it's a small amount of money, £70,000. How come that couldn't be taken out of his budget allocation for his department that he had got, instead of even dependent on the June monitoring? I think that it's disgraceful, the process, the way that these schools were informed. I think there's an issue of equality here because there is no nurture units in any Irish medium school right across the north. So, I think that given those issues, those 2 issues, I think that the Minister, in my opinion, should be making it clear that he will be reversing this decision. I know that's not up to you, but I'm asking you what the bid was in June monitoring and why we couldn't get that resource allocation from the normal budget allocation from the department.
Okay, Chair. I suppose, first of all, in terms of bids, Chair, as explained by the Finance Minister to the Assembly on Tuesday the 14th of June, and as the Minister stated in his letter to you, Chair, of the 24th of June, we're now in a new regime regarding monitoring rounds, and we officials are not in a position to discuss any bids or easements that may or may not have been made. So, unfortunately, I'm not in a position to answer your question in terms of bids. In terms of the...
Just, Trevor, can I ask a question about that? Can you advise if a request for bidding information was made under Freedom of Information, would such a request be refused?
I suppose you obviously would have to address the specifics of that and then work through the normal FOI process. So it all depends in terms of the question, but clearly our view is always that we address the question asked and try to provide as much information as we can.
Deputy Chair, yeah.
In answer to your statement, why, or in question your statement, why? Why? Or is it information that's no longer available?
Well, I suppose 2 things, Chair. First of all, it's up to the executive, clearly, how they run the monitoring rounds. And the second question is, we are here under the control and direction of the Minister. The Minister has clearly stated his position as regards what we as officials are allowed to comment on.
So we would need to ask the Minister?
Yes.
Why? Okay, I'm not sure how that fits in
Is
with
an
openness
element-
and transparency, Chair, to be honest.
Is an element of Jennifer's question warrant an answer, which is about within the department's allocation?
You see, that's the other. Given even setting the June monitoring aside, even if you can't answer questions about June monitoring, why was it not put into or get taken out of the allocation that the department got in their budget?
Sorry, and that's just what I was going to come on to in a second. But I suppose if I could put, first of all, answer that in 2 ways. If I could put in context the position we currently find, that the last time I was here, Chair, I advised the committee on the outworkings of Budget 2016-17. And I think, to me, one of the key issues we have is to put the budget in context. Year on year, we are £52 million down, which is 2.7%. Now, that's after the 20 million that the Minister secured in June monitoring, which is in your papers. So what does that mean in real world? That means that we can't provide the same level of service provision in 16-17 that we provided in 15-16, because in pure cash terms, we're 50 million down. It also means then that there are no funding for any pay and price pressures. And the last time I was here, Ms. Lilwat was asking me in terms of school pressures. Those pay and price pressures are unfunded. So I suppose, to me, the key issue there is any decision that the Minister makes in terms of budget allocation has to be seen in the context of He has finite resources and infinite demand. And we will always have a situation where pressures outweigh our ability to meet those. And any allocation that we have effectively means that there is funding being taken from elsewhere. Specifically in terms of the issue of Irish medium units, as I think as the Minister stated in the Assembly yesterday, this matter is now a subject of a legal process. And I'm not in a position, clearly, it would be inappropriate for me to comment any further on that, because that's where we stand in terms of it's subject to a legal process.
Catherine?
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank you for coming before us and giving us an opportunity to put questions to you. My question is in relation to the investing in the teacher workforce scheme. And just if you have an update possibly, and I suppose my two concerns are, firstly, the original scheme was for teachers who were qualified in the last 3 years, so is there going to be any revision of that? And also, my reading of the previous scheme was that it was for teachers who were 55 to 59. If you were 60 or over, you weren't eligible to get out. So it's really just to see if there's any further discussions on that scheme and any sort of edit to it.
Chair, I suppose, first of all, apologies that is not my area, so I don't know the detail at all. I know that in his letter the Minister did write on the investing in the workforce scheme. All I could say is that my understanding is that he is bringing a paper to the executive, and its meeting this morning. I honestly don't know. I don't have any intelligence whether it's on the agenda this morning. I can't answer the specific questions, but happy if Peter would write to the department. Laverne Montgomery, who's the director responsible, I'm sure would be able to come back. And apologies, Chair.
No, it's okay.
Chris, Colin, Jennifer have indicated.
Thanks, Chair.
Rosemary?
Following on from your point, Trevor, with regards to there being finite resources, I think the committee can absolutely understand and appreciate what you're saying, but it makes it difficult for us to decide if the allocation of those finite resources has been made wisely, or to scrutinise them if we have no information with regards to the processes surrounding them, such as the June monitoring bid. But I appreciate that you said that's a matter for the Minister to address. Has there been any new allocation or allocation considered with regards to the signature project with regards to numeracy and literacy, given the seen success of it with regards to increasing attainment at GCSEs?
I'm not aware. I know that was originally funded under the Delivering Social Change, and that funding has finished. I would need to confirm. I think we have funding allocated for 16-17. I'm not aware, and I appreciate the Minister is reviewing the overall budget in context in terms of the school pressures, and that process ongoing. I'm certainly not aware of anything that any decisions being made specifically on that, but Chair, if Peter would be happy to write to us, we can come back on that specific one. I do know that the Delivering Social Change funding did finish, I'm nearly certain, in 2015-16. That was the end of the central funding for literacy and numeracy.
Further question, Chair. The Assembly agreed a motion to increase early education and childcare provision to free total of 20 hours per week. What work has been done within the department to scope the cost and the viability of introducing that increase?
Once again, I apologise, that's not a policy area that I have any direct lead on, but if you're happy to come. I know that in his letter the Minister has put in quite a bit of information in terms of the Early Years Pathways Fund and set out the background and the context to it and the amount that was allocated in terms of the 2.4 million in the transition fund. But apologies, because you're asking a further level of detail that I'm not aware of.
Okay, final question, Chair. You may
adept, how skillful.
you may cover this yourself, but obviously the aggregated schools budget has been mentioned a lot, and members are receiving a lot of correspondence from a wide range of schools expressing serious difficulties with regards to their budgets. Has the Department or the Education Authority identified any schools that are in the high risk category in respect of deficits or surpluses?
I suppose, Chair, I would say that, and it's back to the earlier point in terms of looking at one specific area. You know, you can't do that without looking at the overall context. I think I said at our last meeting, we would estimate that because of the fact that our allocation was 50 million down, the previous minister, the decision he made was that paying price pressures would be unfunded. We would estimate that in 2016-17 for schools, that's roughly about 60 million, which is 5%. Now, year on year, the single biggest difference is the change in the employer's national insurance. Now, that was a UK-wide change, but that added on, we estimate, roughly about 2%. Now, that's across all schools, but it's also across all employers, so it affects us, it affects health, it's not unique to schools. So I suppose the simple answer I would say is we are fully aware on the level of correspondence that we're receiving, the Minister, in terms of meetings with schools. This is across all schools. 80% of our £2 billion budget goes on staff cost. So effectively there is no, if you like, escape. When you have that level of pressure, that permeates across every single school, every single organisation, the department as well. So I suppose the simple answer I would say is yes, certainly we're aware on the EA in terms of the impact that it's having across all schools. As I said earlier, the Minister's made clear his intention to give further consideration to the 16-17 resource budget position before he makes any final funding decisions, and that process ongoing. But I would say, and be absolutely clear, the Minister is fully aware of the pressures that are with schools. I was with him on Monday in meetings with schools and principals, so he is absolutely aware of that.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, thank you. Now, the order of speakers is Colin. Rosemary, you're a new speaker in this debate. That's why I'm bringing you onto the queue. Colin, Rosemary, Carla, Jennifer. Colin?
Okay, thank you, and thank you for coming along today. I'm sure it must scare you as an accountant to come in and tell non-accountants about figures, and likewise for us listening to it. Sometimes it can be a bit confusing, but maybe if you could just, for my opening question, indulge me as a new member, can you tell me therefore then what the difference is between what you could have done in a monitoring round before versus what you can't do in a monitoring round today in terms of giving us information? Because it would be good just to know what the comparison is there as to, I suppose, essentially what as a new member we're losing out on today. And also just in the June monitoring round, was there any mention in additional monies at all there on any budget line for youth service? Did they get any pennies at all? And just in terms of their budget, is it still ring fenced, and is that likely to be the case going forward? And I don't know if it's the order of the papers, Chair. There's a letter here from the Minister about the surpluses. Is that part of this paper? It's just, I know we had a conversation the last time, and I still remain a little bit unhappy about this information of public money within the surpluses of voluntary grammar schools. Now, I've been advised by some people out on the ground that there's an S40A form that, as I understand it, would explain how much of a budget in a given year is not used and is submitted on an annual basis to the department, and therefore you would actually be able to keep a track of the money that's allocated per year that isn't used, and as maybe just to get some information on that. And I'm not sure if this is the same question that Chris asked, but if it is, I apologise. But are we able to get a list of all the schools and exactly how much they are going to be out of pocket as a result of the changes that are introduced as a result of the superannuation and pension liabilities? I mean, can we get a breakdown school by school just how much they're going to be out of pocket? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Chair, I think it was 5 separate questions, so I'll try and take that in order, and apologies if I missed one. Comparison, I suppose at the end of the day, Chair, the Finance Minister stands up and provides the information to the Assembly, and it is his or her decision in terms of what information is provided. I suppose the comparison I would make would be previously, yes, my recollection is that bids were included in that documentation and that was available. That clearly is no longer the case. As I said earlier, that's a decision for the Ministers and the Executive. In terms of the June monitoring outcome, I think you'd asked in terms of youth. Well, as you can see from the document, we effectively received on capital. Unfortunately, we didn't receive any funding. On the resource, we received 3 items. The 20 million funding commitment that had already been allocated but was absolutely essential for us. The 5 million for school surpluses and the 5 million for special education pressures. That's the total in terms of outcome. You had mentioned in terms of the youth service, the overall budget is about 35 million. I think in terms of the figures. And when you say, is it ring-fenced, certainly, I suppose from my perspective, and apologies, I'm just trying to say, youth and community say about 34.5. That money is certainly allocated, the vast bulk of it is now allocated to the EA with the change in terms of the Youth Council, and I suppose it depends what your terminology of ring-fence. It's certainly allocated for youth and it's absolutely allocated to EA for that purpose. In our budget structure, we actually have a separate spending area for youth, so the money is separate between it and schools. So, yes. In terms of the surpluses and the voluntary grammars, and I appreciate and you asked an AQ, and apologies for the length of the answer, but when I wrote it, I was actually genuinely trying to give as complete a picture, because I do think there are a lot of nuances on quite fundamental differences between how voluntary grammars operate and how controlled and maintained schools operate. The S4A form, or 40 form, in all honesty, I'm not...
It is for voluntary grammar schools, but it wouldn't give the breakdown for public funds and non-public funds in that way, as to how it's been spent. But we're happy to get more detail on exactly what it's for if you want to write to the department.
I suppose the one thing I would say, Chair, is that that form is based on the actual accounts and the public information that we have from the individual schools, and certainly in terms of the analysis that's available in those accounts, there is definitely no simple means of saying this is the amount. Normally what you'll find is you'll have it broken down, say, between if they had a prep or nursery and a secondary, or obviously if it's a primary school. It's done, if you like, on a functional basis, and they will have an income line, but they do not split that between what is in terms of public and what is non-public, and that's, as I say, as we put in this in terms of the line. So happy if you've other questions. We tried to give you genuinely as full an answer as we can to explain the differences between the voluntary grammars and the control maintained. Now, your last question was for all schools. I suppose yes, realistically the simple answer is yes. It would be a spreadsheet that would list out 1,100 schools, and I suppose genuinely, rather than sort of, the only simple way of doing that, or the only accurate way of doing that, would be to write out to every individual school and ask them. But what I think we could probably do is, if you're content, that if we applied what we felt was the sort of the high level estimates, but for instance, like there'd be quite a bit of work, because you'd be going into each individual school, looking at their employment costs, the difference between teaching costs, non-teaching costs, because there's different pay pressures between the sectors, etc. So I suppose the simple answer is yes, but it generally would take a considerable amount of work to do that across all schools. So I suppose all I'd say is, look, if you want to consider that and come back to us formally, but please don't underestimate the amount of work that is across 1,100 schools to do it accurately. What I would say is that from our perspective, as I said earlier to Chris, that we estimate that in overall terms there's a pressure of approximately 60 million across all schools. That's broken down between teaching pay, non-teaching pay, the change in the employer's national insurance and non-pay. But now, Chair, I want to emphasise that's a very high-level planning estimate. To do what Colin is asking for is, you know, a considerable amount of work when you're looking at 1,100 schools. Want it that precise. Realistically, we'd have to write to the EA and write to the voluntary grammar and grant maintain to get that. And I suppose all I'd say is, look, yes, of course we can do that, but it's going to take a considerable amount of effort to pull that together. So.
Two short supplementaries on that, Chair. Just the first one is, in terms of this continued information that we don't know how much public money isn't spent on education that you grant for education, is that good public accounting, that you don't know how much money is left over at the end of the year? And secondly, does nobody know the impact on schools through this programme? How much it's only the individual school that will work out what their pressures are, and then they have to manage those pressures. There's nobody sitting at a high level that could look down and say, whoa, school A is going to be really badly impacted, school F isn't going to be, and work away. Nobody has a holistic grasp of this. It's just wait until the schools come to us as elected reps and complain, and then we have to raise it for them. Is that...
I think some of those answers are contained in your information provided. Is that right, Trevor?
Well, I suppose, Chair, what I was going to say, if I can try and once again just answer the two questions. In terms of the voluntary grammars, yes, we are fully aware how much public funding is given, because that is exactly the amount of funding we give. And we know, in terms of their accounts, at the end of the year, whether they have cash in bank or an overdraft position. We have all of that information. The issue that we don't have is, when you look at that bank account, to know that if they have an amount, say they, hypothetical, they have £50,000 of cash, they don't have an overdraft, how much of that came from non-public funds, how much of that came from public funds. Now, our view has always been that they will always use public funds first, because that's guaranteed income. It comes every month from us, they know exactly how much they're going to get, and clearly the biggest single cost for any school is staff payment. So they must pay staff salaries every month. So to me, if I was sitting as a bursar in a school, the first thing I'd be doing is making sure I'm using my guaranteed income and addressing it first, and then I'm using the non-public funds, which effectively would be parental contributions. You have no guarantee how much that's going to be and when that funding is actually going to appear. So the answer to your question is yes, we absolutely do know how much public funds. Yes, we absolutely do account for that. But what we don't have readily from the accounts information is the split at the end of the year, how much is between public and non-public. In terms of pressures, the figure, we have an analysis here in terms of high level, how much our estimate for teachers' pay, that was roughly about 2%. Non-teaching was about 3.5%, and the employer's national insurance we estimated for 2%. So yes, we do have high-level estimates. We are aware of that, but I suppose, to be honest, I don't look at this as one individual or look at 1,100 individual schools. My advice to the Minister has to be on the basis of the pressure across a £2 billion budget, because that's what the Minister is addressing. So what I look at is, Minister, there is a 60 million or a 5% unfunded pressure across all schools. That permeates across every single school. So I think the answer I would have to your question is, if I was sitting across any school and saying, what is the difference between last year and this year? And clearly these are assumptions. These will all have to be worked out in terms of what actually happens in terms of teachers pay, non-teachers, etc. I would say that the estimate would be that there is a 5% increase year on year on staff costs, the principal difference being the employer's national insurance. That's the one fundamental change there's been in April 2016, which is an increase of 2% compared to last year.
Okay, Rosemary.
Thank you. Well, my question's more actually at the chalk face to do directly in relation to teachers. You'll know over the last number of years that teachers have had fewer and fewer courses to attend to assist with their professional development, and therefore a lot of the support staff for teachers within schools, if they have inspections, etc., have been reduced and are now, with the old education library boards, were reduced actually to a skeleton staff. Is there anywhere within the budget that money has been set aside to increase the number of these support staff again, or teachers in the classroom, and maybe giving extra courses for teacher development within the EA?
Chair, I suppose it's back to my earlier point. As I was here 3 weeks ago and explaining the overall context in terms of the budget, we were down 52 million year on year. That's after 20 million of further funding that the Minister secured 2 or 3 weeks ago. To address that level of reduction, the previous Minister had to come to very difficult decisions in terms of making a reduction of 10 million on the ASB and a reduction of 22 million to the Education Authority budget. Now, the vast majority of the staff, I think that you're speaking to, Rosemary, would come from the EA. So The EA year on year has had a very challenging budget. One, it's 22 million down in cash. It also has the same unfunded pay and price pressures that we have in the department and the schools have. The answer to your specific question is genuinely, I don't know that level of detail. I'm very happy to tell you it's not my policy area, but I think what I would say is, in the context of the overall pressures that we, in terms of the overall budget, are facing, and that the Education Authority are facing, I think it's going to be extremely difficult and challenging to be able to find additional support staff. But that is not a view in terms, that's just my view. The specific answer would have to come from the Education Authority, because they're the people who'd actually provide it. I'm just trying to set out the context that they have in terms of the challenging budget they have and the challenging budget that we have overall. The simple fact is we're down 50 million year on year, and we can't provide the same level of service because of that. And that's before any pay and price pressures are funded.
Yeah, but these people are the chalk face on it. There must be some budget somewhere to help to support the staff. They're the ones that are actually delivering the education programmes.
Well, certainly I'm aware, obviously, as part of the June monitoring outcomes, we receive 5 million for SEN, and part of that is also supporting special schools and mainstream in terms of classroom assistance. So that money was very welcome in terms of trying to address that. I'm just not sure, and apologies, I don't know enough about whether that's specifically the area you're talking about or whether it's other more general assistance. I suppose all I can say is within the overall context.
It's the whole concept of professional development.
Professional development, teacher support.
Teachers.
Oh,
It's
right.
teacher
Well,
support.
sorry.
Continuous
Apologies, Chair. Then,
professional
Yes,
I think then, if you're content, sorry,
Yeah.
that's not my area, and apologies, I can't.
Thanks.
Not in any detail. Sorry.
Carla?
Thank you very much, and can I thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to ask around the redundancies, and I note that previously the department had said that school-based teaching and non-teaching redundancies lead to savings of around 15 million per annum, and this appears to have been revised down to 12.5. So I'm just wondering if you could give us a wee bit more information on that. And the other one then that I just wanted you to maybe delve into a wee bit more is the pathway funding and the allocation of it. I know that some money has gone to it, and I'm just wondering if you could give us some more detail around that.
Okay, Chair. Apologies, I honestly don't recognise the 15 million. Certainly, in terms of the VES, the full year effect, the figure that I'm aware of, and the figure that certainly the previous minister, when we were here on 9th of March, would always have been up to the 12.5 million. So I honestly don't know what the 15 million refers to. That 12.5 million was split between savings from teaching and savings from non-teaching staff. But that's the figure, Carla, that we certainly have been using consistently. And apologies, I genuinely don't recognise the 15 million. In the letter of the 24th of June, Chair, that the Minister wrote to you, and once again, I am not an expert in terms of the early years, but I think it's set out there on the second page that there were 286 groups applied, requiring 6.5 million. Now, clearly, there was only 2.4 million available to be funded. So maybe that's just a real-world example where here we are with 2.4, and effectively there's 3 times as many people looking funding for early years. Of that, the 2.4 was funded to 78 groups, and in addition to that, there was transition funding of 0.28 million were made available for those the settings that were in the original Early Years Fund but hadn't been successful in the transition to the Pathways Fund. And clearly there's some more detail there, Chair, in the letter of the 24th of June.
Thank you.
I want to come to Morris now.
Chairman, thank you. I wanted to ask a question further in relation to the £60 million pressured across all schools. Is it a big task? And I have heard what you've said, all right. But it is a big task, you tell us, to extract that and break it down and see just where each school is or where it features on that £60 million pressure. Can you say to us today, for instance, that that £60 million is right across the whole of the school estate?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
there is no specific concentration in a certain sector or area?
Well, I suppose, Jeff, if I break down the sort of, what we view the pressure as being, there's teachers' pay. Now, teachers' pay overall is about 1 billion of our 2 billion budget. So, roughly.
So that's 50% of your budget you have no control over, really, it's controlled.
Well, we certainly do have control, but it's a statement of fact in terms of that's the quantum in terms of how much you're doing. So, and obviously that would be by far and away the single biggest staff cost in any school.
Right.
So that's the first bit. Then you clearly have non-teaching staff after that, and then, as I said earlier, I think the single biggest change year on year facing all schools is the change in the employer's national insurance. That has come from Westminster. It affects all UK employers, both public and private. It affects the department, schools, Department of Health, everybody. It's not unique to schools. That has added on an additional, we estimate, 2%. So I suppose, Omar, the point I would say is that if you went to any individual school and said to them, how much is your teacher payroll? That costs us roughly an extra 2%. How much is their non-teaching payroll? We would estimate that costs us roughly an extra 3%. And on top of both of those, each one of those then attracts employers' national insurance, so you have to add on another 2. So I suppose the simplest way I would say is, if you brought me the accounts of a school and you said the teaching pay is X, the non-teaching pay is Y, yes, we could very quickly work out how much we would estimate that to be. But I suppose the simple way I would say is, if you were looking at any school, year on year, that pressure is approximately 5%, is our high-level estimate. And I suppose that's the way I would work with it. If you're dealing with any individual school, roughly, now as I say, this is a high-level planning, but roughly it would be about 5% year on year is not being funded.
And can I just ask, you obviously have access to the school accounts?
Well, we have access in terms of the 88 Voluntary Grammar and Grant Maintain integrated. The EA would produce its accounts, and it does an outturn statement for each individual controlled and maintained school. So yes, we can have access to that.
You see, I don't want to keep going on this, Chair, but I do want to ask this question. I think if I picked you up right, you said that you found it difficult to determine what was the figures, maybe the £60 million pressure. What amount of that was contributed by the schools in their account? Can you determine that from figures or accounts that are available to you? I mean, would voluntary grammars, for instance, be more in the figures that they would produce? Would they have a greater contribution from outside of your department than for instance, other schools?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Sorry, I suppose there's 2 separate issues there. Yes, in terms of voluntary grammars, they would have proportionately higher levels of non-public funds than controlled and maintained schools. But I suppose the answer to your earlier question, that pressure would be effectively the same across every single school in the country, because every single school is employing teachers and is employing non-teachers. So the cost of a teacher will increase the same percentage irrespective of what school that teacher is in, and the same for non-teachers. So I suppose the point I would make is we're doing a high-level estimate across the entire 1,100 schools, but the costs that are hitting each school are the same for each individual school, because it's principally teachers and non-teaching staff, and the percentage increase is effectively the same.
So Chair,
Yeah, you're right.
so you're telling me then that the pressure is equal in all 1,100 schools?
Well, the percentage increase would be equal, not the pressure. Sorry, I want to be clear. If you go to any individual school and you have a teacher's payroll, that will have increased by X percent. The non-teaching cost will have increased by X percent. The overall impact of the employer's national insurance, we estimate, is a further 2. So because you've got teaching staff who are on a different payroll and a different pay cycle and different agreements to non-teaching, they're separate. We estimate that the teacher's pay would be roughly an increase of about 2%. The non-teaching would be roughly an increase of about 3%. But I suppose the point that I'm trying to make is that the same percentages apply to each individual school. It depends what ratio between teaching and non-teaching, the impact that would have on each school.
The accountancy's not as good as yours. So anyway,
Apologies, man, I'm not
no, but
explaining this properly.
no, it's not. Chair, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Jennifer, and then Chris.
I'm listening to what you're saying in terms of the monitoring round in the budget. The Education Authority have got quite a substantial budget from the Department of Education, would that be right?
It's just over 500 million this year.
And, you know, that's an arm's length body, isn't that right? Isn't that right? I'm just wondering then, because, I mean, a lot of issues that we're hearing, and I'm picking up even on a constituency basis, you know, are in and around the special educational needs, you know, children in classrooms as well, classroom assistants. And even there's issues there with the like of children that would have, you know, social needs in schools, and you bring in the nurture groups and or units and all that, and counselling and whatever. And right even across the board to the guidance for the ODIS as well, the guidance that was supposed to come out in 2014 and still hasn't come out from the Education Authority. Where does the, you know, who are they accountable to? Who's the Education Authority accountable to? Are they accountable to the department?
Absolutely.
They are?
We have, I think, either 8 or 9 non-departmental public bodies, all of whom are absolutely accountable to the department. We hold all of them to account and to the Minister.
Right. So you're saying about, you know, in terms of their budget, do you have then a sense of, you know, or have they total autonomy on where their money goes, or, you know, what projects, what programmes and everything else their money goes into? Or
I suppose there's 2 elements to that. We allocate the budget to them. So we have allocated them. Effectively, the Education Authority has 3 elements of its budget. Because it's the funding authority for all controlled and maintained schools, it gets its share of the 1.1 billion aggregated schools budget. So that's roughly about 900 million. The 500 million we're talking about is called block grant. And it effectively is there to deliver 2 types of service. The biggest single cost is special education needs. And those would be special schools, mainstream assistant in terms of classroom assistance, and also transport costs. And that would be roughly, of the 500 million, that would be roughly between 200 to 230 if you include the transport. So it's a very substantial amount. The rest of the EA block grant would pay for things such as schools transport, school meals, the C2K, which is the IT infrastructure across all of the schools, rates, the headquarter costs. So the EA provides a lot of services directly out to schools. The EA board and chair are responsible for the allocation of that budget across all of those very difficult and competing pressures. They prepare a draft budget, and that comes to the department for our review and approval. So yes, we absolutely do have a review and approval role. But if you like, the role to me of the EA board is the operational arm of the department. They're there to deliver the Minister's priorities. They're there to make those proposals and decisions, and then that comes to us and we review that budget.
okay. I suppose a second question then, asking in terms of the priorities and the Minister's priorities. And I know that particularly in education, there's an overlap with education and health almost, you know, and we've seen that with the signature projects in terms of the 2 departments working together, and it worked well in some of those cases, particularly where health and education. But just in terms of the new minister's priorities, will his priorities be similar to the previous minister's priorities? In terms of particularly tackling disadvantage and need, and, you know, disadvantage, you know, I'm just wondering what sense you're getting of that, because, and, you know, does that impact upon the budget and where money goes as well?
I suppose the simple answer is that's a question for the Minister, Chair, and or be it from me. What my role is that whenever the Minister has set out his priorities is to ensure that the £2 billion budget is allocated to deliver those priorities, and clearly those priorities will be influenced by the programme for government that the executive have out there. But that's a question for the Minister.
Okay, Chris?
You mentioned serious financial pressures on the department. I suppose I'd be interested to hear if you think there are any other ways to save other than the ones that you've put forward, and I suppose also to ask about Struhl Shared Education Project. The letter says that costs have increased by 15 million owing to quote-unquote optimism bias, 8.5 million to cover staff salaries of the programme delivery unit and around 5 million to cover additional road works. Can you explain what optimism bias is?
Sorry, there's two questions, Sharon. I'll come if you can answer the second one straight. But you'd asked about other areas of savings. Yeah. I suppose in the last 2 years we've had 2 one-year budgets, both of which have been extremely challenging. And as I point out, the 16-17 budget, we're 50 million down. The previous minister worked through a very robust process to identify where we could make savings to ensure that the actual level of reductions was as small as possible. Our budget is effectively fully allocated. We do not have anything else there. And it's back to the earlier point in terms of budget allocations. The key issue for me is that when you're looking at any individual budget allocation, the Minister has a very difficult choice because there will always be greater demand than the budget that we have available. So any budget allocation decision you make cannot be seen in a single context. It has to be seen in the overall context of the budget. And to me, one of the single biggest pressures we have is clearly the unfunded pay pressures in terms of schools. In terms of Struhl, I was just going to pass that on to Stephen because it's a capital project, Chris, which isn't mine, it's on the capital side.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. In terms of optimism bias, if I take that first, optimism bias is it's a cost allowance to allow for uncertainties. Obviously, you would imagine as any capital project proceeds through its design phase, through feasibility, business case and all the various design elements, things will crystallise, things will become clearer. At the outset, when you're at outline business case, there's an awful lot of assumptions and risks that have to be built in. That is based on desk exercise in terms of, you can have topographical survey information, you can have whatever geotech information is available, whatever sites were previously used for. What happens with optimism bias is as the scheme progresses, it will reduce, because particularly whenever you move on to site in a construction programme and you break the earth, you actually will know what's under the ground. There's other factors as well that optimism bias will cover for as we progress through the statutory process, where there's various planning or statutory obligations that are placed on a planning approval that need to be addressed. In terms of the cost uplifts, the 109 million was the initial outline business case figure for Struhl, and that was simply just based on the construction related costs at that time. That was based on very much on early feasibility work. You have very outline designs at that stage, very little detail. You have no elevations or anything in detail, as I say, in terms of what's under the ground. As the project and as it has progressed, things become clearer. And the current estimate, if you do a like-for-like comparison in construction costs with the information we now have and are approved recently by the Department of Finance, the 109 is more equivalent to 137 million. In terms of the letter that issued to the Chair, there is a breakdown of the key factors that have led to that increase. There have been enrolment adjustments which allow the schedules of accommodation for the individual schools within the campus and also for the shared areas. They have increased, and that has accounted for circa 12.8 million of an increase. There's construction price inflation, which you would obviously expect to be brought into account when you're comparing an estimate from 2012 through to 2016. There will be adjustments there. That accounts for a further 10 million of the difference. You also have the design development changes that I've referred to. and that will continue to crystallise. There is a full integrated design team now on board, and they're taking this project through. It's advancing well. There's great strides have been made. The first project is due to complete. That's Arvely Special School. That is due to complete this summer.
Okay, so the budget for this has increased by 28 million in total.
The budget will, yes, it would. The budget has actually increased. Key factors leading to 28 million. Yes.
How does that compare with other projects in terms of acceptability or otherwise?
In terms of acceptability, you have to manage a project as it goes through. The size, obviously, of the Strood programme of work, while you may have a small number of projects on the one site, the totality of those, the shared aspects of those, you could look at any individual school, whether it's a small primary school or whether it's a larger post-primary school, and you will always get fluctuations in price. You will always get an optimism bias built into the approved business case to account for that. That is why the department puts in place its governance arrangements, where we have a project board on every project, which takes receipt of a programme of works. It takes receipt of the spend profiles. We have a full risk register, issues logs, which are managed and monitored on a monthly basis. Obviously, the professional teams are challenged continually where increases arise to engineer those back down wherever possible. That's not meant to be to the detriment of the individual project, that they will get a substandard outcome. Far from it.
Is optimism bias not meant to be in place to avoid overspend rather than actually lead to additional costs?
I would say it's rather than avoiding, it's to make us manage the project better. It's to make us in real time review any changes, whether they're increases, or we can have decreases in projects as well, depending on the site conditions, etc. It actually is to create a greater focus in the context of the approved business case, so that we are in real time monitoring. It keeps the business case as a live document as the project progresses.
And these costs are capital, so they are unrelated to the 50 million pressures being experienced then?
Yes.
50 million are on the revenue side?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ironically, our capital allocation actually increased substantially. So if Philip and Stephen, they actually are the good guys here. They actually have some money to allocate. So there is a separation between resource and capital. Yeah.
Why was there such an increase in capital and such a pressure on revenue?
Well, effectively, that's because of the position at the Northern Ireland block level. In terms of between now and 2020, the executive's block resource position is going to be down 4% in real terms. I think I'm right in saying that the capital position is going to be an increase in real terms, maybe approximately 10%, because I don't know the exact figure, but there is a fundamental difference between the two, and that's at the executive level. So the pressures across all 9 departments for the next 4 years will clearly be on resource. There is less pressure on capital.
If I may just add to that, Chair, in 16-17 there's a 32% increase in the capital on last year. That's 46.9 million, so there is an increase. That has allowed us to free up a number of other key capital projects within the programme to move forward.
Can I ask, if the Fresh Start Agreement awarded £50 million for capital for shared and integrated projects every year for 10 years? Is that the case?
That's correct.
Yes, that's right.
Why can the Strudel Shared Education Project not be funded under the Fresh Start?
I think, and my understanding, Chair, is that because the Strudel project is at least 2 to 3 years old, that was already announced as an executive commitment prior to the negotiation and agreement of the Fresh Start. So my understanding is that the funding was at a time and place, and because the Strudel project has, as Stephen said, been in planning and stuff for 2 to 3 years, that was seen as already announced by the executive, and then wasn't eligible for the funding because the new funding started as the Fresh Start agreement.
Chair, if I may just add to that, the rationale during the discussions with the Northern Ireland Office and Treasury, both parties were clear that projects to be announced through the Fresh Start were to be additional. They took the view that the Strood project had already been announced and that was an executive priority, so should be funded. There was also a number of other schemes, projects that were put forward by the department in those discussions that weren't permitted to be taken forward because they were deemed to have already been announced. There were 3 integrated schools plus the 3 shared campus projects that where finance hadn't been committed. Through that discussion and that dialogue, we were permitted to bring those forward. But you will be acutely aware, as we are, from the letter that was sent to you, Chair, that the spend against Fresh Start in years 1 and 2 is going to be minimal. But we're doing all we possibly can to accelerate the projects, to take them forward as swiftly as we can in development, in procurement, and all measures are being taken, including allocating internal staffing resource as a priority to that programme of work.
What happens to the money that may not be spent?
That money will effectively be lost. It's drawn down as opposed to allocated to the department. So on an annual basis, the department will advise. I'm not sure, is it through to Treasury or through?
Well, I presume it'll be through the Department of Finance and then through the Treasury.
Through Department of Finance, we will advise what our profiled expenditure will be. And as we set out in the letter to you, Chair, we expect in year 1 that is going to be close to 2 million. That is largely going to be professional fees associated with developing. But as I say, all steps will be taken to accelerate this programme of work to ensure that by year 3 we're maximising against the 50 million allocation in that year.
And would that be lost to the executive then, typically?
That money would not, that wasn't even allocated to the executive, as I understand. That will be drawn down directly from Treasury. It was more of a drawdown as opposed to here is an allocation of 50 million and you have to hand it back. There's nothing to hand back.
Okay. As we move to conclusion, Catherine has indicated she wants to ask a question.
Chair, thank you for letting me back in. I know it was cheeky of me to ask, but it was just, I nearly forgot that Stephen was here and that his budget is much nicer than the other budget. So just to avail of that opportunity. And it's really just maybe something that you might not be able to get back to me on today, Stephen, but certainly there's a school in my constituency and you're probably aware, Lismore, who have requested a competition-sized gym hall.
Yes.
Now, I understand that the department has a specified size of the gym hall. However, the school were hoping that this would be community use and that the community would be able to rent this hall, and that would obviously therefore contribute to maybe improving their budget, and that their budget then possibly over the years would be better and healthier. I know that...
Just to advise that this type of query on an individual school in an individual constituency might be better dealt with in a priority written question, that type of thing. That's typically the advice that I would be asked to give to a member.
Chair, can I raise it?
Okay, Chair. Well, that's fair enough. Can I just make my comment more general then? Because I can make it general. And it's really just to say that there's a flexibility there that maybe we're not looking at. That if the school maybe could, for example, pay off the bigger hall and then rent the hall out for community use to ensure that their budget would be healthier, that would help the department overall. So it's just maybe that there's consideration, flexibility and adaptability considered in those circumstances, but I understand if you can't comment on it.
And as I'm about to close this down, I'm giving the final word on this to the other upper band correspondent.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, well, I think, it is important that we don't go down the route of individual schools because I have a list of them. But in relation to flexibility, I do think there is a big issue there, and I think the department needs to be looking at closer working relationships, even around capital spends with councils, with other statutory bodies, because we did have a situation in Upper Bann where the council and the SCLB at that stage worked together, and the provision was a couple of really good 3G pitches at Lurgan Junior High School, and I do think it's a model that worked. And I think there's a reluctance now from the EA's perspective to enter into those types of agreement. So I think some work needs done around that, and I would appreciate even if the department would take a closer look at that.
And finally, Rosemary,
Just
okay.
one, For example, we have community planning now within councils, etc. And surely it's time you could feed back into that and work through it that way.
Could I
Stephen's going to conclude
could I
here.
just make two very brief points? Obviously, in the context of wider community planning, it's incumbent upon the department to work very closely with councils. In doing so, we've written to the chief executives of all 11 councils, and we're seeking meetings. We've set out our capital programme for each, and the principle of that is to work as closely as we can, whether it's in terms of identifying land, pooling resources to maximise the work we can do in a particular area. And I think that is critical moving forward. We've already started with our first engagement with the chief executives and relevant directors in councils in that regard, and that's something we see as vital moving forward to get the best outcome.
I think that's really encouraging, and sorry, on that point, but it's important also that you ensure that the chief executives are feeding this down to members, because ultimately it's them that makes the decisions, and I think some more work needs done.
I mean, that is the intention. We are also receiving correspondence from councils seeking members from working groups of elected members as well, and we are more than happy to engage, because that means we get the best possible project, because a school is a community hub, there's no question. If I may just add one point, Chair, in terms of talking about the budgets, it's just to make it clear that in terms of capital, in the year just closed, we did achieve over 99% spend against our capital budget, so we do continue. While we talked about fresh start, I wouldn't want to leave the illusion that there's any underspend in capital, and there hasn't been in the last 6 years, where we have secured 99% spend every year.
Okay, and I would expect you to report that to the committee in the way you did. Fair play to you.
Hope so.
Okay, thanks very much to the department team for that presentation. Thank you. Okay. And members, as officials leave, Peter will update us on what are a list of action points which follow from that presentation.
So, Chair, is the committee then content to write to the department seeking an update on delivering social change, literacy and numeracy funding, an update on the Investing in Teaching Workforce scheme, information on what the department is doing in terms of costing the extending early years provision, further information on non-public funding for individual voluntary grammars, as they apparently have that information. They do the funding, they don't know how it's spent, so please ask for the funding. Also seeking information on the funding for teacher CPD, continuous professional development, and development generally, and also indicating the committee's support for greater flexibility between the department, the Education Authority, involving councils in the development of educational capital programmes, and greater. Remember wants to add something to that.
It was just the signature project. I know it'll be within delivering social change, but 3 members raised it, so maybe just to pull it out so that we get a wee update. Is there any discussions of bringing that back?
Okay.
Further to Chris's line of questioning there about the Strood campus, I wonder would it be in order to ask for further information from the department regarding the memorandum of agreement in respect of the ownership of school buildings on the site? Okay.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
No, just, I mean, and I don't know if it's for the committee or what it is, but I would be keen to see what the department's priorities are, because I haven't seen any clear set out priorities from the Education Department in this new mandate.
In relation to themes or finance?
Well, I mean, in relation to everything, you know, I mean, because it's important that we know what the department's priorities are, or the minister's priorities are.
Spending, okay.
Chair, the Minister did come on the first day and give some indication, but I would anticipate, and we're coming to this in the Forward Work Programme, that the department will come to the committee early in the autumn with the Programme for Government Action Plan, the 2017 to 21 budget. So you'll get a very...
Get it then?
Well, you can ask for it then.
Yeah.
I think Chris won't. Okay.
Yeah, Chair, you in your letter to the Minister requested, quote-unquote, a further breakdown of the special educational needs allocation, brackets 4 million DEA and 1 million to DE. And you were advised in response that from the Minister, quote-unquote, I have decided to allocate 4 million to the EA and 1 million to DE.
I think, Chair, to explain where that came from, there was some... The department actually got in the June monitoring round was 30 million. and I wasn't expecting that. I thought it was going to be 25. 20 million, what they called the school's funding commitment, which appears to be 15 million for aggregated schools budget and 5 million for SEN. Then there's 5 million for schools drawdown, and then there's another 5 million for SEN again, 4 million of which went to EA and 1 million. And it was that, I couldn't quite understand. We actually got more money than we expected.
My implicit criticism is in no way of you. It's the Minister has basically answered our question by regurgitating our question. We're looking for of how the £4 million allocated to the Education Authority is going to be used,
Well, that'll be
which was
closed.
quite clear from your letter, to be fair to you, Clark and Chair. The Minister's just written it back to us for some reason.
So just on a point, somebody mentioned this to me and it could be totally wrong. Is it if there's a change in excess of 1 million within a budget line or a priority, is there generally that information should be made available somewhere across a year to a committee to be able to scrutinise? And I think it was that point that was used whenever it suggested about the 5 million. What was it? So if there's, tell us that there's 4 million to EA, but it was maybe just to get like a little paragraph, 20 or 30 words afterwards, for whatever that 4 million was going to go for. But
Chair, I'd refer members to my covering note of the green tab about the spending areas. This is something which actually may have confused the predecessor committee. It's under the key points where it says spending areas. There are basically 3 spending areas in the department. One's for capital, one's for schools mainstream, and the other is youth and other children's services. Those are pretty big. So like the capital, they can basically move money from one capital project to another, as you might expect, without, if I read this correctly, bringing it to a monitoring round. Likewise, they seem to be able to move money from anywhere within youth and other children's services in any amount. And this happened from time to time in the last mandate again, so they can do that without reference to a monitoring round. What I would say, as I said there, is that the department has a very good record. In fact, it might be the best record of any of the departments in terms of getting all its money spent by the end of the year. So they're on the money 99+% of the time, both in capital and in resource. So on the one hand, you might say, lack of transparency. But on the other hand, well, the money does get spent in education, but that's a judgment for members to make, sorry, Chair.
But Peter, you're not saying there that they can move money from resource to capital?
No. The member asked this question before. The Public Sector Transformation Fund is money for, essentially, for redundancy. My understanding is that that money can be used for other things, could be used for capital, but that's very exceptional. That's a loan. Yes. That I think the executive gets from the Westminster government. But for any other money, my understanding is capital is always capital, resource is always resource, and never the twain will ever meet, and that is Treasury rules, is my understanding.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Yep. We're moving on now. Members will read this list of actions, this letter to go to the department and the content of it. Moving on now till item 6, Forward Work Programme. And I'll ask members to note the draft Forward Work Programme at page 43. I want you to note correspondence from the Finance Committee and the Committee for the Executive Office and tabled items, red tab, on the timescales for scrutiny of the 2017-21 budget and the programme for government. And I'm asking members if you're content to write to the department seeking sight of draft 2017-21 budget information, including the department's baseline position, its pressures, its spending priorities, any proposed efficiencies, and the linkages to the PFG, and for a briefing on all of the above in September.
Sounds the right road to go, Chair.
What aspect of that are you particularly pleased about? Okay, at this stage now, in relation to the Forward Work Programme, and whenever I saw this initial draft, put on my West of the Band hat, you know, Rosemary, you know,
dangerous.
and didn't score well, so it didn't. But nonetheless, we'll go back to the drawing board because we exist too. I need the whole world to know that. Okay. Especially anybody in the public gallery, we exist too. The rest of the band people, you know. We're prepared to get into a row over it, Morris.
Some of us are with you on that.
Yes, right. Me and you have reached a consensus on that a long time ago. Okay, can I ask the clerk to speak to the generality of the forward work programme and other matters?
Thanks, Chair. So I'll be brief now because we're a bit behind time. So there are two things to talk about. First is about the strategic planning session. So if members are happy, we will do that on the 7th of September. Members had indicated previously they wanted to go off-site to do that, and they wanted to go to a special school. So Torbank Special School, it's handy. Well, it's handy if you're Belfast based, but if you're in Omagh, it certainly isn't. But this would be our first attempt at going off-site, and didn't want to go too far. See from the
Why not?
Peter, you should be scolded now.
Are you just testing us here, Peter?
The short answer is yes, actually, because I understand that in the other, as I recall, in the other mandate,
East Belfast can be overlooked very easily.
Neglect.
Very important that we outreach there. Yeah.
sometimes we do have quorum issues whenever we meet off-site. So consequently, I just want to see how this goes.
Yeah.
We'll meet the first few in Belfast, and then after
You
that,
all behave.
We'll certainly monitor
special
attendance
treat,
when we
yes.
do cross the river band. We'll be monitoring attendance.
So the session on the 7th of September might be a bit lengthy, might be about 2 hours. So what the plan would be is that it would be an informal session and in private. There's a lot in education. There's a lot of stuff. I write these lots of notes. Sometimes those work for members, and I think sometimes they really don't. So what I'm planning on doing is for the first half of that session is we'll get research. Caroline, who's much better at explaining stuff than I am, will come along and explain about education and about the education-related parts of the budget and the draft, the PFG, as much information as we have at that point. So basically, that will be an opportunity for members to ask questions. So questions you might consider silly questions. There's an opportunity to do that in private. A member mentioned to me the other day some of the unusual, we had a GCSE briefing, and they indicated how unusual it was that there were so many providers. So there are interesting features in education that you may want to challenge in private about. So that's what we do. The second bit then will be research will then pick out and explain a number of key areas of education policy, and then I will seek your views on the subject matter for our first formal inquiry. If that all goes as planned, then I would then draft up the terms of reference for the inquiry, seek your formal approval on the 14th of September, and then we'd write out to stakeholders immediately with the idea of taking evidence when we get clear of the budget and the PFG consultation, which would be nearer Christmas. That sounds like an awfully long time, but my experience of education stakeholders is they want 3 months. You ask them a big question about ETI or about shared education, they want a month to think about it, a month to come up with their answer, a month to put it through governance. And if you try and make it any shorter than that, they get quite cross with me. So hopefully that will work quite neatly. So that will be the plan for the 7th. Then on the, I'll just draw your attention to page 43 of your pack, the forward work programme itself. I've now managed to flesh this out till about Christmas. I've populated it with the briefings you previously agreed to. I've added a couple of others. So, Chairperson, I'm now seeking the committee's agreement to some of the others. So, for example, there's a consultation underway now by the department on the attendance strategy. So the idea was we get a briefing on the 14th of the 9th. Also, there's a consultation underway on special educational needs and disability regulations. So this relates to statementing, but it's not the changes to statementing that we are expecting later in the session. So the department would come on the 28th of September to talk about that. I penciled in for a budget and PFG briefing on the 5th of October, but after I'd written this, the committee has now agreed that we'll seek an earlier briefing on the draft information, and we'll see what we get there. Also suggesting that we talk about area planning on the 12th of October. So these are the big plans which the department told us about 2 weeks ago. They were going to cover all sectors, including special schools, and will be of interest to you on a constituency level, no doubt, but also on a bigger sort of policy area as well. Then there's nurture provision. A report was produced by QUB and indeed by the department just at the end of the last mandate. I haven't actually seen the report yet, but the idea is we would get them to come along then and talk about this. Is something the predecessor committee was very interested in. Then I'm expecting the ETI Chief Inspector's 2-yearly report to be in on 16th of November. And you can see we've located the various places. I'll talk about that in a minute. But also suggest a briefing with the Governing Bodies Association. That's the grammar school. It's not an NDPB, but it's a representative body on the 19th to 10th, and that will round off our sectoral body introductions. So we'll have to do something with CNAG, so we're going to see them next week. If members then feel that they still need the full introductory briefing, they can add that to the briefing to the work programme, should they so desire. TRC, Transfers Representative Council, and Control Sectoral Support Council, I have them in on the 21st September. They now want separate briefings. Well, members may observe that the Catholic bishops wanted the same. They wanted a separate briefing from CCNA. So anyway, this is quite interesting. So I'd also penciled in an EA brief for September, but members are saying no, we're going to do that next week. So I'll make that change. So meeting outside, Torbank Special School on the 7th. Now, the first few, as I said, are in Belfast to see how we get on. The St Dominic's High School, Falls Road, West Belfast. This is a voluntary grammar, all-girls school. They had invited us previously. We haven't formally agreed this with them yet. They're one of the top-performing schools. The idea would be that we would go around all of the sectors and see everybody. They just happen to be ones that we talked to previously and I think are quite easy to get to. Then there's Ashfield Boys on the 16th of November. Yeah, and that I think will coincide with the ETI Chief Inspector's report. Usually what the Chief Inspector says will comment on the very good performance of non-selective schools like Ashfield Boys, so that might be handy to go then. Then there's Down High School on the 30th of November. They'd previously invited the committee because they do a lot of work on STEM, and I think they also offer the GCSE or maybe the A level even on computing studies. So
It's grammar, is it? Down High School?
It's a controlled grammar. So it is. So we've done special school, Catholic voluntary grammar, controlled non-selective, controlled selective stroke grammar. So we have primary schools to go to. If the committee chooses, we might go to an Irish medium school. And integrated schools we haven't been to. My plan would be, subject to committee agreement, is that further on we'll go out maybe once a month to the school, and that we'll see how we get on with quorum, because joking aside, I'd be very conscious that members, some of them have a very long way to travel. Want to get them travelling any further, and you will have other demands on your time. There's also some suggested briefings in the to be scheduled box. For example, there's the previous minister's expert group on GCSEs and A levels, which I anticipate will report this summer. There's changes to SEN statement thing. So this is you'll hear it referred to as the code of practice, the SEN code of practice. This is where I anticipate the 5-stage statementing process in schools will become a 3-stage statementing process. So not making any judgment about whether that is good or bad. It will certainly be the cause of a huge amount of comment in the school, so I'm sure you'll want to be all over that. There's an ETI review of the curriculum, which is due to report at some point. And in ministerial question, I noticed there was a reference to a review of the spending of targeting social need money, so you might want to get that, or you might want to go around that. And likewise, there's an executive strategy for children and young people, which the department has a responsibility for. On the 7th to the 9th, I'll ask you about inquiries. I'll just tell you now, it's my understanding that the Public Accounts Committee will be doing work on special educational needs early in 2017. To explain the procedures, I don't make the rules. The Public Accounts Committee has primacy. If they take on a subject, so the audit office are doing a report on it now, that will come out sometime before Christmas. Public Accounts Committee will take up cudgels, as it were, on that in early 2017, and that means we can't touch that particular subject. What the committee still can do, though, is look at the proposed changes to the Code of Practice. So all of the changes that the department wants to do, definitely have a go at that, and lots to say. But in terms of an inquiry into special educational needs, my current understanding is that no, we couldn't do that. And I would anticipate PAC will not be done with that subject completely for about a year.
What would be the terms that the Public Accounts Committee will inquire in the special educational needs?
Well, what they'll do is they'll look into the audit office report. So I haven't seen the report, I don't know yet. I mean, if there's And for a start, I think there'll be quite a lot of elbow room in terms of for the Committee for Education to get involved with around the changes to statementing, and there's a lot of interest in that. But I'll have to see the Audit Office report, which I haven't. It hasn't been published yet, but that may influence the committee's decision in terms of inquiries in September.
Okay, any comments, members? A lot of stuff being laid out here. One visit that I would like to undertake is to the Struhl Shared Education Campus. It's an iconic project. It's major spend. It's I think a previous committee may have made a visit, but I think at some early point it might be appropriate to visit the development situation there.
What category is that under, Chair? Or is this one that you feel that needs to be done independent of every?
Well, it's a major area of work for the department. If you notice, even you know, the level of priority that is attached to it by the investment and infrastructure team, and even in the way they talk about their high-level work, they always refer to this Struhl Shared Education Campus.
So if the committee agrees.
Yeah. So again, it's only a suggestion at this stage, you know.
No, Chair, I'm not opposed to that, because I do think there is merits. That's a fairly hefty scheme, and it has been in the pipeline for some time.
It's referred to so often, I think members need to get an understanding of it.
Yeah, that's on the old Army Barracks site.
It is indeed. Lisnelly, yeah. Lisnelly changed to Struhl, but the recent name.
Why was that, Chair? You
don't know, but maybe you could ask, you know. Okay.
One day I might.
I think the young people came up with that. The young people may have come up with it. A youth participatory group. Isn't that right? That's right. Agreed. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
The direction of travel, as we say. Now, members, we have two significant presentations between now and the conclusion of this meeting, and it's now 20 to 12. I mightn't just afford the normal latitude of 3-4 questions, you know, so if members could be a bit tighter and a bit more efficient with their line of question, you know, I think that might be...
Good grace is about to go out the window.
Yes, certainly, it's honeymoon's over. But I think a main question and a supplementary would be acceptable, just in terms of time management, no other reason. If members wish to challenge me on that, I'll probably yield a bit. But I would rather stick with that general principle.
That
okay.
sounds fair, Chair.
Yeah. No. You're the worst offender.
We'll see how Chris copes with this.
If I ever hear Carlos in very quickly, she does not mean it, right? Okay. So, first up now is the Northern Ireland Council for Integrated Education oral briefing. So the clerk, just brief context.
So, Chair, the paper from NICE is at page 57 of your meeting packs. This is just an introductory briefing. Members should note the department has previously asked that the paper at page 72, which is marked as restricted, be treated as if it is confidential. It's included here only for members' information. So, go for it.
We'll ask the team to come into the room.
NICE.
As distinct from the same. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Aye, okay. Thanks very much for coming along.
Thank you.
And for your patience, you know.
It's okay.
Patience is a virtue. Okay, thanks very much. And I'm going to hand over straight away to the Chief Executive Officer, Roisin Marshall, to make a presentation, but equally to introduce the team, Roisin, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Barry. Roisin Marshall, Chief Executive of the Northern Ireland Council for Integrated Education. And on my right is Lorna McAlpine, and Lorna is the Senior Development Officer with the Council. And Helen McLaughlin is our Vice Chair of the Board of Directors of the Council for Integrated Education.
Your presentation might last around 10 minutes, is that right, Roisin?
That's fine,
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
So first of all, I'd like to thank the committee very much for inviting us to present here today. We presented a briefing paper to you prior to this meeting, and we'll only have time in the next 10 minutes to elaborate on a few points. We are the Northern Ireland Council for Integrated Education. We were originally a charity set up in 1987 to assist with the development of integrated education, and we're now a non-departmental public body since 2011 to assist the Department of Education to encourage and facilitate the development of integrated education. Our vision is an education system which brings Catholics, Protestants, children of other beliefs and cultures together in one school. And our mission is to build a cohesive society by advocating for the development and facilitating the growth of high-quality integrated education. This will only be achieved by influencing innovation and collaboration with other educational bodies. So we're holding 3 basic premises today. That all members here are aware of statistics that show that schools in Northern Ireland in the preschool, primary and post-primary phases are broadly identified with one community or the other. We have statistics from the Department Statistics and Research that show controlled integrated schools, Protestant 50%, Catholic 25%, other or no religion or unknown 25%. For grant-maintained integrated schools, 40, 40, 20. Controlled schools, 70, 6, 20. Catholic maintained, Protestant 1%, Catholic 97%, other no religion unknown 2%. Other maintained 8, 84 and 8, and voluntary 28, 60, 12. Just to put you in the picture, those are the statistics that are out there. So it is well known that the schools are broadly identified with one community or the other. The second basic premise is that all members hope that through the programme for government to promote reconciliation, and believe that this can be achieved by educating Catholics, Protestants, children of other beliefs and cultures together. And NICE would suggest that this is best done in the one school. NICE would also like to make it clear that integrated schools are both Christian and inclusive of children of other faiths or beliefs, and they're not secular. 35 years of experience has taught us that it is possible to educate children of all faiths and those with no faith together in one school. In fact, we would argue that it encourages children to understand that there are different perspectives and to respect difference. And the third basic premise is that all members here are aware that DE have a duty to encourage and facilitate integrated education. That is the education together of Protestant and Catholic cultures and traditions on a broadly equal footing for the public benefit. So we've had steady growth over the last 35 years of integrated education, from 0 to approximately 22,000 children. NICE wishes to acknowledge that we are where we are today for lots of very well documented reasons, which we won't go into today. But I'm going to outline what we've noticed recently in terms of opportunities and how we can help to take these opportunities. There are a number of schools with a mix of Protestants and Catholics, 10%, 20%, 30% or more. Out of the 129 schools in total, not including special or preschool, 133 have a 10% or more mix of Protestants and Catholics. And we need to help you to find a way for these schools to declare to their communities that they are schools deliberately designed to proactively plan for equality and contribute to reconciliation. We've also noticed that the development of current integrated schools through Fresh Start Agreement funding, and that's there, and we need to help you to make sure that this money is spent to support communities in reconciliation. We are working with various partners, including DE and the NIO, to maximise the impact of this funding. We've also noticed that political manifestos are reflecting a perceived shift in voter mood towards integration. And we need to help you to find a way to enable people to embrace reconciliation in education by creating shared spaces for education. Evidence of schools is another thing that we've noticed wanting to be involved with integrated education, including special schools. And we need to help you to find a way to enable special schools to be rewarded for their contribution to integrated education. Opportunities for shared education, that is, schools working together. We need to help you to support schools who are or who wish to be involved in shared education by working with other partners to see how valuable their contribution can be towards a more integrated education system. We've noticed the development of jointly managed church schools potential, and NICE are very positive towards shared education and jointly managed church schools. We'd wish to offer our support and training programmes and skills through working in partnership with the EA and CCMS and other support bodies on Peace 4 programmes. Preschool provision, we've also noticed, are also broadly identified with one community or another, and so we would need to help you to ensure that preschool education also contributes to reconciliation. What do we want to happen? Together with you and our educational partners, we would like to find ways to change those statistics that I recited earlier so that more children from Catholic and Protestant cultures and traditions are educated together in the one school. That's it in its very simplest context. Together we want to help schools to be microcosms of the society that we want to see. NICE do not wish to be labelled as a sector, but as a catalyst for integration and sharing to assist the Department of Education and EA to encourage and facilitate integrated education. The challenges for us over the next 5 years, the top 4 are encouraging and facilitating schools wishing to become integrated, assessing the demand for integrated education and enabling integrated education to continue to grow through area planning, ensure integrated schools are given support to continue to be good schools, enabling each child to reach their full potential, and statutory powers for NICE or encourage EA to take their power to plan for and facilitate integrated education. 6 things we're asking you today is to reflect and implement the conclusions and recommendations of the Integrated Education Review, to encourage and incentivise transformation to integrated status for controlled, maintained and voluntary schools, to support a way to assess desire of parents for their children to be educated with Protestants and Catholics together. And if the government, in particular the Department of Education, fulfils its obligations to encourage and facilitate the growth of integrated education, then some of the measures and indicators in the draft programme for government could be successfully addressed by integrated schools. We can go into this in more detail if you wish. We suggest that DE write to the schools with 10% of a mix or more. That would be really helpful. And the final thing is that we want to hold DE and others to account for planning for and reporting on progress towards an education system in which Catholics, Protestants, children of other beliefs and cultures are brought together in one school. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much for the presentation, Roisin, and I'm going to open it up to members shortly. I'll lead with the question myself, and then I'll ask Maurice to come in. Okay?
Sure.
And I'm challenging in my first question. Just want to say that attitudinal surveys show a high degree of support for integrated education, but given that few integrated schools are oversubscribed, would NICE agree that this suggests that support for integrated education is overstated in surveys?
We believe that there are integrated schools that exist. We are here to promote integration as a concept of Protestants and Catholics be educated together. That's our fundamental purpose. There are schools that are more successful than others, but that's down to a lot of different factors, buildings, the performance of the school and so on. There is a desire when the polls go out, there is a desire for people to have integrated education because they know what that is, Protestants and Catholics and others together. But when it comes to actually choosing particular schools, people will vote for other reasons perhaps. but it's not fundamentally that they disagree with the concept of integrated education. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I'd say the level of oversubscription is significant in some areas, and it needs to be acknowledged. There are other schools which are on the journey of transformation, and sometimes those schools take a while to establish themselves in the community in a different guise than they've previously been there. But, for example, Lagan, we're turning away a class every year from Lagan, and that needs to be addressed. And there are other areas in North Down where there's oversubscription as well, and you know, some of the, like Slemish and so on, be oversubscribed. There's a significant number of schools that would be well oversubscribed, and it's that needs to be dealt with. And as I say, other schools who have transformed more recently are finding it harder to establish themselves. It's a longer journey to establish themselves than it would be from a grant-maintained integrated school. So it's sometimes reflective of the different routes by which the schools became established. Like a Priory in North Down, it's taken a while to become established as a transformation, and would now be heading towards oversubscription as well. It takes a wee while, at times.
I think it's fair to say that there is an absence of a statutory body with responsibility for planning integrated education provision. Is that right?
Yes, very much so.
And would you like to elaborate on what that means to you?
Do you want to?
Well, at the moment, CCMS we're going to hear from later, they plan for their sector, and the EA plans really for provision for everybody, and specifically then for control. So there really is no one that plans for us, and I'm present at the planning tables for area working groups and so on, and so would Roisin be there, but there in an advisory capacity. So the question is, are we advising for the grant-maintained integrated schools and the controlled integrated schools, or just the grant-maintained? And it is advisory. So what we're trying to do is garner information from the schools as to where they see their future and then present that forward. But we don't have any right to plan, if that makes sense to you. So it is a sort of a partnership, but it's very much a junior partnership with the EA and CCMS, which inhibits what we can do, really.
Thank you. Maurice?
Thank you, Chair. And can I thank Roisin for her presentation, and I've listened carefully to what Lorna has said here. But there's a few questions I'd like to ask you. Just since your inception, what was it, 87? How do you think you've been meeting your aims and objectives?
That's a good question. I think as a small organisation, which NICE is, I think excuse the expression, we've always punched above our weight. If you think about the number of schools that have been developed over 35 years, that's 63 schools, offering round about 22,000 children access to integrated education. I think we've certainly met those targets very well. Again, back to the planning issue, there has never been a big strategic plan for integrated education. And I guess it has felt a little that NICE have been, I suppose, doing this on their own along with our sister organisation, the Integrated Education Fund. But this has come from the communities up, from parents, from boards of governors, but essentially I think that's why they're successful, because we have worked with them from within the community. So we would see the success has been exponentially in terms of the numbers of schools and numbers of children accessing integrated education. But we also are of the realisation that we cannot do this on our own, that we need, we are assisting the Department of Education and the Education Authority, and we really need and want to work as partners with them to enable them to strategically plan for Protestant and Catholic children and others to be educated together.
One final supplementary, if you can.
Just one, Chair. I had 6 here.
A couple of sub-clauses would have been there.
Could I ask you part one of my supplementary? Do you see shared education as a competitor?
No, not at all. We don't see, we see anything that enables children from Protestant, Catholic, other faiths and none coming together as a good thing. And we have been involved if you like, in the development of shared education right from its inception, even before it was termed shared education. We had, and NICE in particular played a really big role working with CCMS, working with the education and library boards as they were then, to develop what we called integrating education. And that was the concept that integration is not necessarily a state that you are in and is static, but a journey that we go on. And working and living and growing up here, we do know that all of this is a journey, and reconciliation is a journey, and it's not an easy journey to choose. So NICE would feel very supportive of the concept of schools coming together. We also understand how difficult reconciliation is and how difficult it is for a school to proactively encourage children and parents from the minority community, whatever that is within their community, to come to them. And that isn't an easy thing to do. And I think doing it in partnership is definitely a good way to go. However, we would ultimately say that the children being together, playing together, eating together, learning together in the one school is the ultimate thing that's going to actually change our system to where that is the norm and not the exception.
Finally.
And where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
We see ourselves very much working in partnership, full partnership, with the other educational bodies, promoting and encouraging schools to be proactively attracting children from the minority communities. We see encouraging good, sustainable schools to become integrated, shared places.
Yeah, I would echo that. And I think that probably what I would add to it in terms of 10 years down the line, the one thing that we've really boiled our work down to, I think, in NICE, is that it is about giving children that opportunity to be in the same school together all day, every day. We'd love to see that 10 years down the line, the system would be becoming that. But I think that increasingly we feel that, as Roisin has said, the way to do that is to work with others. We're very keen to, the word sector is very easy because it's a nice, I suppose it's a catch-all term for a group of schools, but we're very keen that 10 years down the line we wouldn't be talking about the integrated education sector of 63 schools, which has avidly protected itself only for the next 10 years. We would like to be seen as an organisation that has gone out, that has worked with CCMS, with EA and with other sectors to ensure that more children have that opportunity to just be together all day, every day, and that they don't feel from day one of P1 that somehow they're different from the kid in the other street. That would be certainly my...
You too.
Thank you. The list, the order of the speakers: Catherine, Rosemary, Chris, Carla, Jennifer. That's the order. Catherine.
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank you for your presentation and also just take this opportunity to commend your vision. I went through the school system, the Catholic sector, and my first engagement with Protestants was when I went to university at 18. And that's really a crazy thought when you think about it, that it took so long for that engagement to begin. I spent 2 of my 5 years teaching in Drumrall Integrated in Omagh, Chair, and I have to say they are a shining example of what integrated education should be, and they should be very proud. The principal there is just fantastic, and as are the staff and the pupils. But I also have worked 3 years of my teaching career in other sectors, so I do believe that there's a space for the other sectors, and I'm glad that you concur with that, because parental choice is important. But I also think the language is important, because all too often we focus on Catholics and Protestants coming together, but we live in an increasingly diverse society where our ethnic minority community are ever increasing. And I think, as well as Catholics and Protestants coming together, and for that to be a huge opportunity to tackle sectarianism, to create a society where we don't just school together but we live together as well, because our housing estates are often segregated as well, whereas our work isn't. You go to work and you work with whoever is employed within that area. So I think it's important that we also appreciate that the ethnic minority community are vital and important in our integrated schools. But also, would you recognise as well that there is natural integration taking place in school? And that was the first time I'd ever heard your call to contact schools. Do you actually say to them, you don't maybe realise, but you are an integrated school? And that's the first time that I've heard that being voiced. And that there is natural integration going on, and that has to be recognised, commended, etc. throughout.
Yeah, can I go back on that? Absolutely. It's something that we would increasingly notice, is that often you might talk to someone who'd say, well, my child goes to an integrated school, and really for us it's not a school that's on our list, but if it's a very mixed school, then they're doing something which is bringing children together. What we're very interested in is, because I still would consider us to be pretty fragile here. In terms of reconciliation, I feel we're still very much post-conflict. There are conflict legacy issues still ongoing. So it just seems to me that because of maybe that fragility, there's work to be done to really support those schools. Some of that would be about, how could they really ensure that that mix that they have is maintained, sustained, that it grows, that they have that integrated ethos in their DNA. And we did a bit of an experiment a few years ago and wrote out to schools. At that stage, we were wanting to develop an initiative called Positive Partnerships for Integration, which was really about bringing schools together who, those schools who feel, well, we kind of are integrated anyway, to work with an integrated school and see what they could learn from each other, and see if they wanted to go the full kind of journey towards integration, or just to engage in a mutual learning experience. And we had a lot of interest back. And the interest was from as many schools as we already have integrated schools. So we've got 63 integrated schools, and we had over 60 responses. And they were from all sectors, which we kind of weren't expecting. And we are battling to have that initiative supported, in fairness, and to get the funding for that. We've been able to run a pilot of it with 2 schools, which has gone wonderfully and which was formally celebrated just a few weeks ago. But yes, there are schools out there doing good stuff. Because we're the integrated sector, we don't have the monopoly on bringing kids together. So that's why we're really keen to work with other schools. And if there are schools there who feel we might be integration ready because we think we're kind of doing good stuff anyway, well, let's push on that open door and work with that to bolster really the groundwork for reconciliation in the society.
I'm about to move on to Rosemary.
Could I just add a wee bit to that? Sorry, Chair, if I could add a wee bit. I suppose I'm the stats person really on this. There's, as Roisin was saying, there's 1,029 schools now in Northern Ireland, and only 133 of those have any mix at 10% or beyond. So that's around the 12-13% of schools, and we would have, out of that, there are only 67 schools that are not integrated that are in that grouping. So what we're trying to say is that those schools should be encouraged to actually think about maybe going the extra step toward integration. And I take your point, about between 30 and 40% of people now in schools are not denoting as either Protestant or Catholic, they're denoting as other. So that might be people who just don't want to be labelled at all, or they might be ethnic minorities, a mixture of all sorts. And we are in a more diverse society, and that's wonderful for everybody to embrace that. But I think what we're saying is, it's still a small, 133 out of that 1,029 is still a small number, and those it would be great if we could encourage the people who are in the non-integrated schools to transform to integrated status. I think that would be something that would help towards a programme for government around shared space and around reconciliation and all those wonderful aspirations that are within the outcomes of the programme for government.
With your indulgence, Rosemary, Morris has a direct...
It's a supplementary on that, what Lorna has said. Lorna, amid the rest of your... Sorry about this. You said there that the number of schools is 133 out of 1,029.
Yes, which have a mix of 10% Catholic, 10% Protestant.
I got that bit. But the question I really want to ask you, maybe this is an unfair question, what was that like when you started off?
Well, I've been working at this a long time, and it hits around just over the 100 mark for a long, long time. That's about where it's been sitting. You know, I think, and your point, I think that going back to the point that integration has been a long, hard journey. And that number's gone up slightly.
Politics, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. That number's gone up slightly in the last few years. It used to sort of sit about 120. It's in the 100, 120. It's not what you would describe as a huge number. You know, it is only 12 or 13% of the total. And I think the point that Roisin was trying to make to you was that for each of the schools that are each of the two routes, grant maintained integrated status and controlled integrated status, the control comes about by a transformation of an existing school. But when a group of parents want an integrated provision in their area, they ask the schools around them, would they like to transform? And sometimes when they don't want to do that, then the parents have to go down the grant maintained integrated route. And NICE had an arrangement where with the club banks they could give them funding to enable them to start a building, and they would get revenue funding from the government in their first 3 years until they were deemed to be vested and so on. The problem with that is that route was closed off to us some years ago when the crash happened, and that meant that we could no longer offer the grant maintained route to parents who might have wanted that. So transformation then became the only route, and as we described earlier on, that is a journey for schools. That's the journey of changing your history from being a school which is catered predominantly for Protestant children to a school which caters for across the community.
Thank you, Chair.
Rosemary?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. I come from the west of the Ban, and I think it's right to say that your integrated primary schools, they are all in the bigger towns in the area, in west of the Ban. And surely you've got to recognise that shared education has been very, very successful in Fermanagh. Shared education, not only for the children, but I think for the teachers and staff. It gives them a hub within our rural communities to work around. And I think while you're trying to promote integrated education, I also think there is a very big place in our society today for shared education, where the children still have their own, are educated in their own schools and have allegiance to the area that they live within, but mix with other children within a slightly wider area for the various things that are of common interest to them. Would you not recognise that?
Absolutely, and Rosemary, I have worked within shared education projects myself, and I completely get what you're saying. But the fundamental issue here is that those schools are still not schools that are attracting people from the minority community. Schools can work in partnership, bring the children together. The children may, over a period of 7 years while they're in the primary, or 7 years in post-primary, have an opportunity of maybe a year, or it's regular sustained contact, and I understand that. That a child will have some contact over the period of time, hopefully, if it's a good shared education project. What we're arguing for, and technically we're not promoting it because we're encouraging facilitate and not promote, and we have a bit of an issue about that, but we are saying that it is, in our view and in our experience over 35 years, it is possible to have Catholics, Protestants, children of other faiths and none in school together all day, every day. And that's what we would like to see within our education system. It isn't, I accept, a possibility for every area or every school. And when that's not possible, shared education absolutely is a fantastic way to help and contribute to reconciliation. However, we're saying that it is possible, particularly for those schools that are mixed already, but also for those schools where, and the schools themselves know potentially where it's possible, that integrated education is also a vehicle that, in our view, can actually make the systemic change that we need to see. Because children, whether we tell them or not, know that I was educated in a different school than my Protestant counterpart. And they will know that, and they will tell us in years to come that that's what we modelled for them. And we're trying to change that, but we accept that everything that brings together children is definitely worthwhile and definitely valuable and definitely contributing.
Thank you. And once again, you said you were inclusive of all faiths. And I have no doubt about that. But I know in our separate schools, controlled, maintained, you have various things such as communion, first communion for some of the children. Is that catered for within the integrated?
Absolutely.
Because
absolutely.
I find, and is that done within the school?
Yeah.
Can I?
Because I find that a bit strange if you're for all faiths.
Yeah.
Leave. Oh, why would that be within the school hours rather than maybe after school?
Yeah. I just wanted to respond, but actually it's not something that was within school hours, though. So sorry, but it was part of what the school offered. My son goes to an integrated primary school, and he was able to make his first communion with the support of the school, but it was done after school hours. But what was really lovely about it, and I think this is something. Now, I come from a Catholic background, and I went to an excellent Catholic school in Derry, Thornhill College, which I think gave me a lot for, preparation for life. The only thing, that it didn't give me was my Protestant best friend went to Foyle in Londonderry, and we had to go off in different buses, and, But what was lovely about the sacrament experience in the integrated school was and it was mainly mums, I have to say, the mums whose kids were not making First Communion, in other words, the parents of children who were either from Protestant backgrounds or other backgrounds and beliefs, put on a huge reception for us in the school hall after the First Communion celebration. And for my parents, coming from a Catholic background and wondering, how's this all going to pan out? It's an integrated school, how does this work? It was a wonderful experience because his First Communion was celebrated by people from all backgrounds, not just our background, and I think they were quite bowled over by that. I think what I also take from your question, Rosemary, though, when I do hear it, is, and it's something that we do think about, in NICE and within integrated schools, is what's the right balance of that? And I don't know if we've got it 100% right or not, but I like the fact that my son learns about lots of other faiths in his school, but he doesn't have to leave his identity at the door. You bring your own identity with you, and that the school will find a way of enabling you to celebrate that. But that whole question of how much that should sit in school or not, I mean, that's nearly its a whole other question. Yeah. But it has worked very well for us and hopefully for children of other faiths in the school.
If I could just come in on that, it's important to realise the schools are not secular, and it's something that's a misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. The schools are secular, and in Northern Ireland our schools are faith schools. The issue around the sacramental preparation is done for the Catholic children who want that, but also we have a programme for the Protestant faith children who wish to learn more about their own faith, and as those of us who are from one particular faith or the other, or denomination within the Protestantism, Methodists don't know a lot about what Church of Ireland do, don't know a lot about what Presbyterians do. So we have a programme called Delving Deeper, which allows children from the Protestant faith to go and explore that at the same time as the children from Catholic faith are exploring that. And in some schools they have a third stream, which is about social and moral issues for children who just want to go down the sort of more humanist approach. So then children can be split up as they wish to understand the deeper aspects of their own backgrounds, but at the same time they're getting an overarching thing which is about moral and social and the value systems that are commonly held within all the faiths.
Okay. And just is it okay if I
say?
It's just on that point. I think there's also a wee bit of a myth that parents who send their children to integrated schools are somehow non-believers or have lost their faith or have moved away. So just to say that it's very much trying to make sure that you don't miss out on anything you would have got had you gone to a Catholic or Sunday school or whatever, but also making sure that everybody's included, and it's listening to who are the others that are within our community and how do we accommodate those people. And I think every school has been able to find a way, but it is certainly about listening to the parents and listening to people within the school community and making sure that whatever faith background they come from, or indeed other faiths and none, are able to be heard and able to find a place and able to feel that they belong. I think that's really, really crucial in the development of integrated provision. And the thing is, we know it can work because we've proved it over 35 years.
Chris, over to you.
All right, thanks, Chair. Thanks very much indeed for your presentation. I and my party wholeheartedly support the vision of an integrated society and believe that an integrated education system has a vital role to play in that. So I thank you for the outstanding job that you're doing in extremely difficult circumstances at times to contribute towards that. I think an education system that allows people from all backgrounds to come together in one school is something that is increasingly supported in Northern Ireland. Polls, surveys, my engagement with young people suggests that it's an aspiration shared by many people in our community, many more people that are able to access that type of provision in our community. So I think we do have an important challenge there. I believe it was the previous First Minister, Chair, who said that it was fundamentally wrong that we separate children on the basis of religion at age 5. So we have increasing support in that regard. My questions, 3 questions, Chair, if I'm allowed. The first is it possible to say a little bit more about what the transformation process looks like and how parents or schools that are interested in it would go about engaging with it?
Yep. Really what happens is it can come from a number of different sources. Parents may decide that they would like it, or it may be a board of governors, or it could be a principal that they would like to explore the thing. And if it comes from the sort of governing body of the school, they can involve us or the EA as it is now in meeting with parents to say, is this something you would like to do? Sometimes, though, it could come from a parental body, so 20% of the parent body could put a notice in to say we would like to transform, and then the governing body then has to accept that and run with it. And then through the best way is to really sort of explain to everybody what would be involved in the process, so that they understand where they're going to, that the journey is, as we described, a long one, and it can be taken at the pace that the school wants it to, which is often quite gentle, and the change becomes sort of incremental. It's not catastrophic change. It's incremental change. And then the parents then are balloted. It's a secret ballot run by the Electoral Reform Society, and more than 50% of the people have to respond on the ballot, and more than 50% of those who voted have to vote in favour. And then a development proposal is put forward through the EA, and that also has the objection period, the normal objection period to run, and so on. And then the minister makes a decision about whether the school should be able to transform or not. What I would be looking for in a hopeful transformation would be that the school had thoroughly engaged with us on the whole transformation process and engaged with their parents and their teachers, because the teachers apparently, as the transformation process sits at the moment, they don't get a vote. So they have to, they're the ones who have to make it work and have to get on with it and do all the stuff that we were talking about earlier on about provision for Catholic education and so on, as the schools have all been former Protestant schools have transformed, control schools. So all that has to be done with the teachers. And once the minister says that's fine, go ahead, then a support period of about maybe 3 to 5 years minimum has to be run through with the schools to transform them, to change them from being a school which has been predominantly attended by Protestant children into a school which has at least 10% of its first year of its year 8 intake if it's a secondary post-primary school, or of its P1 intake would have to be of the Catholic faith in order for it to be able to meet its move from conditional approval into full approval. So you can see it's quite a long and tortuous process even on that thing. And they say for some of the most big primary schools that have transformed, it has been a long journey to get that balance up, because we would the aspiration would be that the 10% in the first year would go year on year to get to 30% of the minority tradition over time. And that has been a big ask for the bigger schools because of the difficulty of getting the numbers in the door, which makes the difference between the GMI, which has got the balance at the start, to the transforming school, which has to get it over time. It's quite a difficult piece of legislation, and as regarded really.
Helpful to be aware of the
it's a
processes
difficult
that
piece.
are available
Yeah,
though, and to be worked on. You obviously stress the importance of teacher and parental engagement, and parental choice is often highlighted as of extreme importance. You mentioned in your presentation a desire to see a better mechanism to assess parental preference. Do you have any specific ideas as to how the executive or the Department for Education could attempt to do that better assessment of parental choice in particular areas?
We do have some ideas. You know, there's a notion of when a child is born and you're registering their birth. You know, is there an opportunity for a little tear-off slip just to say, you know, the type of education broadly that you wish your child to see? That might help us. You know, Catholic schools have baptismal records and so on. So there's something around that. Maybe later on, as they, you know, come into preschool, maybe that's an opportunity to ask parents. Those are a couple of the ideas. But, you know, I suppose we're thinking of being creative here. At the minute, there is no way to assess. We had the needs model, which has, you know, we isn't showing us anything other than what we have. And if we, you know, that'll just give us what we've got. And again, this idea of integrated education growing within, you know, you've got so many children at Catholic schools, so many children at controlled schools, and then so many children at integrated schools. To suggest that that will be the same as it goes through is sort of a nonsense. And so we need to find some way of. But I guess you know, our challenge is we got to find this collectively, and we got to find something that suits everyone, and that will actually give us the information that we need in terms of what do parents really want. Because when you ask them, they'll say, yeah, I have no problem with, you know, my Catholic child going to school with Protestant children. I have no problem with that. And they generally don't. But how do we actually hear that and then enable good, sustainable schools to transform, you know, albeit the transformation process, we'd like to look at that as well. But there must be a way that we can say and enable them to attract children of the minority community.
There's some creative suggestions there, yeah.
Can I add to that? It's just one thought. If you think about the fact that we've had area planning now going on for some time, you know, if you kind of if you zoomed in from anywhere else and said, well, you know, what's the basis of planning? You know, the basis of planning is obviously assessing supply, demand. You know, what do people want? What's already available? How do you then create what it is that's really wanted or best for a community? So I suppose we have embarked on a process of area planning, probably without really doing that. There's been basic market research about supply and demand, which means that it has just become, in many ways, more of the same. You know, so there's something to think about going forward for area planning. Is how do you find out what's actually wanted?
And one more thing, sorry, just to add to that, is the whole idea of, and the IAF in particular have been for years working on, you know, deliberative polls, community audits, and we would really hope to work with the IAF and, you know, with DE and EA to say, is there a way that we could refine the kind of community audits that we have to something that's economical and something that you could draw on to say, what is it that this particular community, because all communities are different, and, you know, you got to really listen to the context and listen to their desires.
Final question, Chair. Definitely.
You're a good man. You're going well. Carol is next, and then Jennifer. But final question.
Interestingly, the Fresh Start panel report on disbandment of paramilitary groups in Northern Ireland, set up by the executive, stated that the executive should set ambitious targets and milestones to measurably reduce segregation in education as quickly as possible. I guess you could set your ambitious targets and milestones quite easily, but to try and be engaged with the clear point that is made, have the executive engaged with yourselves further to this clear recommendation in the Fresh Start panel report with regards to how that might be achieved?
No. My suggestion would be that those 60-odd schools that have the 10% of mixing and should be written to and asked would they like, formally written to, would they like to transform by the department, because that would be evidence of the department meeting its duty to encourage and facilitate the growth of integrated education.
Okay, so there's work to be done off
Yeah,
the back of that
there's definitely work to be
recommendation.
done there.
We would also suggest that, you know, and we are used to this, and we've been around for a little while. 35 years isn't, or certainly NICE been around for 20 odd years. But we would suggest that this isn't going to be a big implosion of, you know, and although our ambition is that this becomes the norm and that we have 93% of schools integrated as opposed to the other way around in time, but we're very conscious that that has to be at the pace of people. So what we would suggest is that it's school by school, community by community, when they're ready, working with and in collaboration with all of the key educational bodies, including CCMS, and I'm stating that very clearly here. I think there is a way around making the transformation process work for them too, and we would really be invitational to your support to us to enable them to be able to do that as well.
Carla? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and can I thank Roisin and her colleagues for their presentation. I suppose Chris actually maybe touched on one of the points that I wanted to make around statistics going forward as to the demand, and I do think that is an important piece of work that you really need to be drilling down into, because we are all acutely aware of parental choice, and of course we want to be, you know, as a department and as a government, we want to be ensuring that parents have a choice, but I think it's important for you to really gauge the actual need out in the community. And I suppose the link that I would say might be quite useful is community planning, which was devolved to the local councils. So, you know, I think that there has to be some work done around that. I also think a key statistic going forward for yourself would also be, and you touched on it earlier, Lorna, was around oversubscription.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting statistic that maybe needs drilled down into a wee bit more, because it's very easy to say, oh, you know, it's oversubscribed, or, you know, I think if you had the actual figures, and maybe you probably already have them, but I think that would be a useful ticket. And also, you know, in what particular areas that there is oversubscription, where the demand is high, I think that would be useful going forward as well.
We do have that, yeah.
And if you didn't mind, Carla, I'm going to take Jennifer's question now as well.
Mine's more just because I mean, I've spoken, I don't know if it was yourselves, but I spoke to people from your organisation before, and, you know, it was just, I don't think anybody could argue with your vision, you know what I mean, because, and as quite rightly has been pointed out, education and housing are two areas that we need to make some breakthrough in terms of segregation, because people are still living in segregated communities, particularly more so in areas like Belfast than anywhere else. But I think that also in terms of education, you know, because very much, I mean, I'm very aware, like even now, the young people in my own constituency will probably be going through life what Catherine was saying. You know, you'll go to nursery school, you go to primary school, you go to post-primary, and you'll probably not meet anybody from a different community background until you go to work or you go to further education later on, which I think is very sad, given, you know, where the distance that we've came from in terms of the conflict. But just because it's just to touch on, because I think what you're saying now is probably the way that you probably will, in my opinion, raise awareness of it and actually maybe realise the vision in years to come, because it's about working with the different organisations, the different sectors, and particularly with shared education and all that, because it's a mindset in people as well. And I think that as a parent myself, even, you know, in terms of your parental choice or whatever, you do look at all different things when you're sending your child to a school, and you want the best for your child. And all the schools, I mean, they're all good schools, I'm not suggesting that, but it's also handiness from where you live. So if you're living in an area that doesn't have a school that is integrated, or you're living in an area, you're going to send your child to the nearest school just for that. And I also think that the mindset as well, because again, you know, you have, and somebody mentioned about first communions and all that, and you do still have that perception of integrated schools not, you know, having any sort of, you know,
Or secular,
what you're saying.
it's
Almost
incorrect.
like,
It's
I like
incorrect,
that
yeah.
secular, and
Yeah,
I think getting that out there too. But I mean, certainly, I don't think anybody could disagree with the point that you're making in terms of, unless we break through, and unfortunately we are where we are because of the history of education and how it developed here. But until we break through those two particular areas where the segregation is still very much the way of it is in education and in housing, you know, we're just going to continue on to have that. And someone mentioned earlier too, because I was at a meeting last week, and there's actually a school in West Belfast at the minute, St Joseph's, I think it is, in Slate Street. It used to be called Slate Street years ago. And they actually have a fifth of their young children now and families coming from different ethnic minority backgrounds. You know, so it's not just a religious thing, it's a social mix as well we need, but we also need that mix with you know, the people that are coming here to live and to settle here, and the families and that. But I wish as well, I mean, and as I say, you know, the vision, I don't think anybody can argue it, but I think that the way you're talking is a sensible way of doing it, and a wee bit more maybe awareness of, because again, you know, people have all sorts of things in their heads when you're a mummy and a daddy, and when you're sending your child to school, and you know, they might just not know, you know, what integrated education has to.
Yeah, just need to check now as you conclude that you're addressing issues raised in Carla's questions, and then yours.
Well, mine isn't even a question, mine's more a comment.
Okay, okay, if you can conclude in the same breath, please. Thank you.
So yeah, I just wanted to make a wee quick response, because I think both of those interventions are really important for us, and the whole thing about gauging demand I think is really important. And what I would love us to do is lift it up a level, to sort of get out of the mindset of integrated education needs to gauge demand for integrated education, to actually look at, as a society, we need to gauge demand for different kinds of education. So when we talk about, you know, when I gave the example of area planning, if you looked in an area at what, you know, how parental preference fell, it could look very different in one area to another. But that's gauging demand for all types of schools. I suppose what I would say is I'd be looking for a spirit of equity between the different educational providers, so that if integrated education had to show demand and go out and do research and show demand, really other sectors should do that too. And I know I'm using the word sector and I shouldn't, but you know, other bodies should. But I think it's about looking together anyway with all the other bodies and with DE and with yourselves at how do we gauge demand at a strategic level across Northern Ireland and the different areas and communities. And I just wanted to thank everybody, and I know Roisin's going to finish off now, but I think those interventions were very helpful, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Barry. Just for summing up, I think excellent intervention there in terms of the community planning. I have to say we really need to get our heads around that, because it is, you know, we're a small organisation. There's a lot of
need to get their heads.
Yeah, there are a lot of community, you know, all of the council areas, all of the community planning. There may be meetings where there's not education mentioned at all. So we really need help with that, and I'm not sure who we really go to try and facilitate and so on. But it's where it's happening, so we need to find some way of being a voice there as well. I know that the EA and CCMS are there as statutory bodies. We aren't. We have to find out when they're on and get there and so on. So that's a wee bit of a barrier for us. In terms of a lot of these things, we're hoping that the Integrated Education Review will reveal a lot for both yourselves and for us moving forward, and we'd really like to I suppose that you will consider really carefully what comes out of that review, and hopefully that will address some of the issues that we've talked about today. The area planning situation is it's one we're probably spending most of our time on right now, and we do that willingly, and we really are looking for, and I take your point it really about Jennifer, about you know, when we talk about the situation in Northern Ireland is that we still have separate education for Catholics and Protestants. Every school is coping and managing some are maybe not having ethnic minorities, but all the different sectors are coping with that, and it's a really important thing for all of us to be aware of. Integrated schools, because they've had to think about maybe the differences and different people that are coming, have really embraced that, but so have the Catholic maintained sector and so on. So the whole gamut of difference is important for all schools. We are particularly interested in bringing Catholics and Protestants together. And finally, the help from yourselves in making sure that the department, in their duty to encourage and facilitate, do encourage those schools who do have a mix already. We are quite happy to work with them, and if that's not a comfortable place to be, with whatever their managing authority is, along with ourselves, but to say, you know, you can too declare to your community that we are an integrated school. And I think we're trying to move away from the negative connotations associated with integrated education and really encourage schools to say, this is for all of us, and this is these are schools for reconciliation. These are going to contribute in the future, and for your draft programme for government, we feel this fits in really well with all the reconciliation, and one of the measures could be numbers of children attending integrated schools, all of those big sustainable schools that come with us on the journey of attracting those of the minority community. I think that's everything we'd have to say, and thank you so much for listening to us today and inviting us along.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you finish that? We've passed half of it.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, all the best. So just members, you know that the remainder of the meeting will have a CCMS presentation shortly, and then we'll just conclude on some correspondence and any other business. And so it's my intention that this meeting will be over at 1:15 p.m. I know that's a long time away, but if we can work towards 1:10 for the conclusion of this presentation. And with that, can I also ask you if you require any further briefing on relevant matters from today's presentation from NICE? For example, a briefing on the independent review of integrated education, which is to report in September. We might go down that road. Is that okay?
Chair, it'd be interesting as well if we can maybe write to the department to ask if and how they'd be engaging with NICE with regard to that recommendation from the Fresh Start panel report.
Okay. And you made reference to the programme for government, didn't you? Or is it just Fresh Start?
It makes reference to the programme for government, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Now, as you know, the Corlea and the Gael Sculliacht oral briefing has been deferred, and we're going to hear from them on a specific matter next Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. So you're asked to treat the restricted paper in this section of your pack, this is item 8 of the agenda, as if it was confidential. Okay? And moving on now till the final oral briefing, and commend members for their stamina here, and with that, young McGrath takes leave.
Remember to just remind that you're currently on your quorum. So
okay. Okay.
So nobody else can go. What happens if you need to go to the loo?
Can I welcome the Council for Catholic Maintained Schools, Mr. Jim Clark and his team, and thank you for your patience, because this meeting has run over a little bit.
We did notice.
So thanks for that. But it's
we're not to blame, Mr. Chairman.
It's a 3-member team or a 4-member team, Jim, today?
It's
a
3-member.
Okay, okay. I'll hand over to you straight away, Jim, to make your introductions and to make your presentation, and we'll want to ask questions.
Right, well, I'm joined by Jerry Lundy, who's Deputy Chief Executive and responsible for planning in the Council, and Eugene O'Neill, who's the Director of Human Resources and Finance. Malachy Crudden, who's the Director of Education, is tied up in a process today, so he's not available to us. So thank you for the invitation to come and brief you. We have sent you a paper which outlines some issues which we think are important. One, to make clear just exactly what CCMS is, because it does
occasionally appear to be some confusion. So I think it's important that I state that we are a statutory body. We are not a sectoral body in the sense that that term has been used in recent times. We came about in officially 1989 through the Education Order 1989, and we were formed primarily because of the fact that the Catholic sector was disparate. Its standards were lower than other sectors. Its employment practices were...
What do you mean by standards there, Jim? Standards?
Outcomes for young people in Catholic schools. Employment practices were rather parochial, to say the least. And because of the fact that at that time the grant for capital was 85%, many of the schools were of lesser quality in terms of the range of resources and even the size of classrooms in some instances. So those were the three significant areas that we had responsibility for, and those areas are mirrored with the then Education and Library Boards and now Education Authority. So in those major areas of activity, we are the mirror of the Education Authority. They have those responsibilities for controlled schools. We have those responsibilities for Catholic maintained schools. And then, of course, EA has a range of services, such as school meals, transport, special needs, the provision of ancillary staff in maintained and controlled schools. Eugene will outline some further issues in relation to the Council. As you're aware, because of the decision not to proceed with the Education and Skills Authority, we were all hanging on a thread for 7 or 8 years, which significantly depleted the education service as a whole. We couldn't hire staff. We were encouraged to make staff redundant. But when the decision not to proceed with that was made and the Education Authority formed, CCMS was retained, and therefore we had to engage through the Department of Education in an organisational review, which actually came out with a very positive view of the organisation and its effectiveness and its cost effectiveness as well. And I'll ask Eugene to say a little more on that. And the first briefing paper that you have is from the introduction to what KPMG were given to background the Council. So on that basis we felt it was important to give it to you as well, particularly for the new members. We also provided you with a paper looking at some of the key areas that are from our current business plan. And these reflect many of the key areas that I've outlined as Council responsibilities. And amongst these, I think it's very important that we emphasise the raising standards in schools, because I did indicate that we came about because our standards were behind other sectors. In virtually every other measure now that you can apply to education, the maintained sector is ahead significantly in some areas, slightly in others. And that's despite the fact that the pupil profile in Catholic maintained schools would be, in terms of social deprivation, would be about 10–11% higher. So the value added, I think, that has emerged over the period of the existence of CCMS has been quite significant within the school sector. Also within that, there are references to area-based planning, and we see area-based planning still as a critical area of development, not just in terms of the buildings, and in fact our view of area-based planning is that it is planning for access to the curriculum. So we see area planning as providing schools that meet the needs of pupils rather than schools that provide for themselves. And much of our legislation at this moment, if you look at it, is all about the school. It's not about the child, it's about the school. And we see that as an impediment to, for instance, closing the gap, because many of the levers of change are in the hands of individual schools. So therefore the ability to manage a system, particularly to achieve outcomes on a broader front, is actually quite constrained. And we look forward to aspects of the programme for government, to the new programme for government, to pull many of these strands together, particularly in relation to dealing with disadvantage at a very early stage and recognising the cross-departmental potential of an outcomes-focused programme for government to deliver the preparation, if you like, for young people coming to school so that they're better able to access the benefits of education. And indeed, we would be very strongly supportive of initiatives right across across government, including the community and voluntary sectors and all of the bodies to guide the education journey, so that the outcomes for those who come from less advantaged backgrounds are hopefully going to be closer to those from more advantaged backgrounds, the Closing the Gap agenda. The third paper is a paper prepared by Council last year, presented at the Council's December meeting and sent to all the political parties before the programme for government discussions were publicly taking place. And the intention there was to reflect what the Council felt were the key priorities in education, that we see it not as an end in itself, but very much as transformational in terms of social and economic policy. So those were the background papers. There are a number of challenges facing education, and I'm quite sure you will have questions on those, so I'll maybe leave it to you to decide what those challenges are. But just before I finish, if Eugene would just like to say a few words on the KPMG organisational review, and then Jerry will make one or two comments on the business plan.
Okay, well, I suppose I should describe the background to the KPMG review. In 2007, when RPA was first announced, we entered into a vacancy control situation where we weren't allowed to appoint new staff, and we had to operate within the organisation then in terms of filling vacancies. In 2010, we commenced a programme of cost reductions with our own staff in preparation for the establishment of ESA. In 2014, the summer of 2014, we began to realise, I think we had early indications that perhaps ESA wouldn't be the chosen model and EA would, and we opened up negotiations with the department around what we needed to do to shape ourselves. The department confirmed that they would commission an independent external review of our body before they would make any decisions in the future for us. We agreed terms of reference with the department in and around January 15, and they appointed then KPMG to come in and have a look at us in March 15. KPMG stayed with us from March until the end of June. Really, it was a 3-month, 4-month evaluation. They looked at just about every aspect of the organisation and went into the history of us as well, and we had to produce give them open and free access to just about everything. Coming out of that, they produced a draft report in July 15 and a final report in September 15. Which we were very happy with, I have to say. We found the experience positive, the experience of being reviewed positive, and we found that engagement with KPMG and with the department open and constructive. They recognised that there were a series of challenges in our organisation, and they also recognised the achievements, because we would be quite proud of those. And I suppose they did make commentary on the organisation's ethos and the commitment of our officers that were still with us by 14. We thought that their outcome was a fair assessment of where we are. It was balanced as well with what needs to be done. So they made some serious recommendations around how we might restructure the organisation and better use our resources. And they made some what we consider to be recommendations for positive change. And they provided us with an opportunity, I suppose, to look at a vision for the future. They made some recommendations around the governance of Council. So around how we are governed by our members, and our members are very engaged in that process as well. And particular in that they wanted us to focus on a business plan and a corporate plan that would take us into the short and medium term. So that's where we are in terms of restructuring now, and we're about 50% of the way into that journey, where we're now looking at how we recruit into the vacant posts and use our resources in the manner that KPMG has suggested and that we've agreed with the department.
Okay, good afternoon. I provided to yourselves a short extract from a range of the targets that we have within our current business plan. That is obviously now being reshaped, and the Department of Education has now asked us to look at the business plan and to change it slightly in terms of the targets. But we just picked out some of those in terms of what our priorities are, and really it is about raising standards, and it's about raising standards, about looking at the performance of our schools and engaging not just with those schools who have, and that's the first Every School a Good School target, not those schools who have been identified as underperforming and supporting them in addressing that underperformance, but it's developing a proactive strategy to engage with them so that we can identify from our perspective which schools are underperforming, and then we can have an intervention, to have an early intervention to make that change. Again, it's about asking schools, because we do not manage schools. Those schools are managed by our boards of governors and led by our principals and senior leaders. So one of the key targets that we have as well, and we've identified an issue, and it's a number 3 in a sense, it's about looking at how we appoint leaders into schools, because ultimately the processes that we've been using have remained in place over the past for 15, 16 years. So we've now embarked on a period of significant review about those processes and how we recruit our leaders and for the future and support those leaders. Again, just highlight that area planning remains a very key focus of our work. We have engaged in very significant programmes of reorganisation and rationalisation in the primary and post-primary sector, but the targets that I'd highlighted for you is a significant stream of work now, and a strand of our work is engaging in exploring the development of shared education, shared campuses and other projects related to that. And those are both structural change but also ultimately relationship change, and those are some of the key targets that we've identified. So it was the targets identified just to give you a flavour of the level of work that we are and that we're engaged in, and each of those works has their own particular challenges within it in terms of implementing. What do you do, and how can you implement the targets and achieve those targets at a time of restricted resource and other issues?
Okay, thank you. If I open up on the questions, Rosemary has indicated after me, and then Jennifer. Thanks for the presentation. My first question would be about the CCMS, just setting out the differences or overlap between yourselves and the Catholic Schools Trustee Service. And then my second question would relate to the area that Eugene detailed there, but I'll ask that in a wee second about the review. Just it's setting out the differences between yourselves and the Catholic Schools Trustee Service.
Well, CCMS is the Council for Catholic Maintained Schools. It doesn't have responsibility for the Catholic voluntary grammar schools. They have trustees, many of whom are religious orders, some of them are diocesan, and this goes back historically to negotiations around the creation of CCMS. I think the initial intention was that the body, which came about as a consequence of the Aston Report in 1979, would cover all the Catholic sector, but I wasn't around at that time, surprisingly. To understand all of the negotiations. The discussions around the ESA bill would have given responsibility to trustees for setting a scheme of management for all Catholic maintained schools, and that aspiration, I think, has carried through to aspects of the trustee support body, in recognition that they would have a responsibility to influence aspects of the whole Catholic sector and to bring a degree of unity across that sector. For instance, you'll be aware that many of the area planning initiatives that we've brought forward have been focused on creating schools that are viable to deliver the entitlement framework, and in many respects that has meant the creation of schools which were non-selective, including the putting together of grammar and non-grammar schools. In some instances, those have been designated as Catholic maintained schools. In others, they've retained the voluntary status. The intention of the support body is to overview all of that area planning responsibility, to take a role which we don't have, which is to promote the Catholic sector. We advocate for the Catholic sector, but we don't promote Catholic education. This body will have a role in promoting Catholic education and exploiting the potential linkages across all of the Catholic maintained schools, in the same way as the control schools body would have a sector of responsibility for trying to get a cohesion and an ethos development in the control sector.
Okay, thank you for that. And just to follow on from maybe what Eugene was saying, is the Council to change some of its functions and perhaps seek economies of scale by working more closely with the Education Authority?
One of the recommendations, a very strong recommendation in the KPMG review, was that we seek every opportunity for exploiting synergies. And in fact, we have a meeting set up. It was set up for the end of this month.
This morning?
This morning, actually. It has been postponed to September now, but it is to discuss with the senior leadership of the Education Authority how we might look at areas of common service. In terms of what they can deliver for us through economies of scale that we don't have to do then. So we're quite open to that. And in fact, it goes on now at the moment, but not on a formal basis. I think we're looking at developing memorandums of understanding and service level agreements then that would formally cede to the EA responsibility for delivering some of our service.
Yeah, I mean, if I just give you a very precise example of that in terms of the major capital programme and the new processes that have been implemented by the department, CCMS resources the senior responsible officer part of the project, that is, chairs the project boards and does that, but we have a very significant agreement with the Education Authority who provide all of the project sponsors, the public sector project manager, to deliver all of that, and that's been in place, and indeed it's expanding over the past 18 months, and it's a very highly effective. The approach that we had taken in project sponsors is a very technical, experienced role required. It is much better for the Education Authority, who build schools and do buildings day in and day out, for that team of expertise to be available to us, as opposed to CCMS recruiting officers of that and having a narrow focus. So that's a very precise example of how we've moved very significantly to that model. But as Eugene has said, we're in the process of formalising all of that through formal service level agreements and memorandum of understanding. And then I suppose the other example in terms of the shared campus programmes, we've established a model where CCMS and the EA share the responsibilities in terms of the projects. We have joint responsibility in terms of the senior responsible owners. We also have agreed where the Education Authority provides a resource to manage the technical side, and CCMS provides a resource to manage the educational advice and those sorts of negotiations with both boards of governors. So we're not replicating or duplicating. We've agreed a role that we would exercise in partnership, and they have agreed a role that they would exercise in partnership with us. So it has progressed, but as Eugene has said, we do need to formalise it, and then we would expand it. And indeed, that is one of our key business targets for this year, to actually further develop and formalise those roles.
Thank you. Rosemary?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of it. It's to go back and take a look at area planning. I represent Fermanagh and South Tyrone, and I'm wondering if you can give me an update there on your plans for rationalisation in relation to the rural area and in relation to Dungannon and Enniskillen.
Oh, I'll leave that to Jerry, who's head of planning.
Well, in terms of the post-primary,
it's post-primary
in particular. Well, in terms of post-primary, we've had an approval to rationalise the provision in the Lisnaskea, Rosslea, Derrylin area, where that's been approved. We're building an amalgamation there between St Eugene's and Rosslea and St Cole's College. That's well underway. As part of that, we considered very carefully the need to retain additional provision in St Aidan's, Derrylin. We believe that it's a very isolated area, that with a very significant collaborative arrangement, the curricular deficiencies that school would experience as a small school can be addressed. So we're building what we would call a federation between the new school in Lisnaskea and the new school would be in Lisnaskea and St Aidan's and Derrylin. We're currently in consultation then in Enniskillen. We've consulted with the two grammars and indeed our two maintained secondary schools. It's a challenging consultation. There's a very significant consensus that the outcome of having two larger schools is the way forward. There's a significant level of concern and community concern about the methodology for using that. We have proposed as the consultation option that the grammar schools become bigger and non-selective, and the two maintained schools would then close. And that's causing a lot of anxiety and stress. So we've gone back to the schools. The outcome of the consultation is not inclusive. So we're going to do further development work with the 4 schools to see can we arrive at a greater consensus. But the challenges still remain because one of the maintained secondary schools in particular has a very, very small intake, has significant budgetary challenges, and there is a particular issue with sixth form. So that is a rural, they're serving a rural area in particular. So it's part of the area, I suppose, the meat and drink of area planning, in the sense that you really have to listen to what the community says. You have to try and address their concerns, but ultimately we have to move to making a decision at some stage. But we believe that it is about relationships, about building relationships and building collaboration at this particular point in time there. We're still reviewing the position of St Mary's in Irvinstown. One of the issues which is, I suppose, populated our approach to area planning, we're very concerned that if we make a decision and do a consultation to close a school, whether it's rural or urban, we're very concerned that when that school is closed and those young people and they're displaced, that we do not want children going to another school, which will then be subject to a further disruption and a change. So we have taken the approach that those schools, for example, St Mary's and Irvinstown, we need to have a resolution about what the shape of provision would be in Fermanagh and Enniskillen. And that causes difficulties, but that's, I think, has permeated our approach, in that if we're going to identify a school for closure, we want to be absolutely sure that the provision that those young people are then provided with is actually going to be stable and not subject to a further dramatic change. It is the easiest thing in the world to identify a school. This school is not sustainable, it's not viable. The issue for us and the focus is, if that school is not there for that community, how will the educational needs of that community be served? And I think that's a key focus of the work that we're doing in area planning. One of the, I suppose, key aspects of the rural area in Fermanagh is we're very heavily involved also in exploring the potential of the shared campus between Brookborough Controlled Primary School and St Mary's. The project board has now been established for that, and work is very significantly underway to take that forward. So it's our area plans are very, very clearly set out. We look at schools which are 2-teacher schools in the first instance, but in terms of post-primary, our plans are very set up. We're into implementation there at this particular point in time.
Just a couple of comments on that. I was just thinking of Balleek, St Mary's in Balleek, of that. And second thing, could you give sort of a further explanation to me, in my ignorance, of what you mean by a federation between Lisnaskea and St Aidan's in Derry Lynn? Will children be moving, or pupils be moving across campuses, things like that?
It's actually both. What you have to do is you have to have a formal governance arrangement. You need to make young people may be reluctant to move, and you don't want children travelling needlessly, but you have to make sure that it's driven by the curriculum. So, for example, a smaller school with an intake of 40 pupils can only provide a particular range of curriculum. It's ensuring that those young people can be provided with a wider choice of curriculum. Given the geography in an area, it is really about teachers, sharing teachers and teachers transferring, that they can deliver curriculum. So, but it has to be formally governed, and it needs to be stable, because it can't change from year to year. You need to have a formal agreement with the boards of governors to do that. So we would really look at the formal governance arrangements that we're putting in place to oversee shared campuses is the model that we would use for an area such as St Aidan's in Derry Lynn. So it's focused on the curriculum. A school like St Aidan's can provide 75 or 80% of the curriculum. How do we fill the gap? St Aidan's is an 11 to 16 school. Can we ensure a seamless pathway of transition to a 16 to 19 and post-16 provision in the new college in Lisnaskea? So it's about widening an opportunity for those young people.
Okay. And just one more, and then in relation to the Enniskillen, the proposals for Enniskillen, do you not think that perhaps you will lose pupils to other schools if you're joining together the grammar and non-grammar sectors within your, do you not think perhaps parents that still value, and there are parents out there that still value a grammar school education, will perhaps look to the integrated sector or to the control sector or wherever? Do you not think you'll hemorrhage pupils that way?
Well, I think parents are always going to have a choice, and I think it's about offering parents a choice. So yes, that may be the case. I think our priority is focusing on the needs of the vast majority of pupils who need access to high quality, sustainable and viable education. What I would say in terms of where we have, I suppose, taken this model before, and I use Holy Cross College, St Killian's, and even the newly established St Ronan's College in Lurgan, those schools are all full, or very closely on the way to being full. So I think what we have looked at in terms of is providing a very high quality outcome, and parents will then have a choice whether they decide to access that high quality in our sector or indeed access it in another sector. And I think that's we have to be absolutely open and accepting of parents' wishes and preferences. The focus is providing a very high quality, sustainable and viable school that the community has confidence in. Our experience to date in terms of the largest, most widely known projects in terms of Holy Cross College and St Killian's, and indeed the new St Ronan's, which is only established this year, and which has had, well, last year they had an intake of about 200 into Year 8. This year we're struggling because there's over 260 youngsters going into that school into Year 8 in Lurgan. So I think that in itself is the approach, but not restricting parental choice, but it's looking at the vision for
the issue of parental choice is that we've got to have the same choice for all parents, not a choice for some parents over others, which is what the current system allows for. But the key issue here, as Jerry has indicated, is access to the curriculum. And the simple fact of life is that to deliver the 24 and 27 subjects of the entitlement framework, which is a minimum, we need to maximise the collaboration between schools within and across sectors. So our ambition in this is not about buildings per se, it's about access to the curriculum. And it is about an equality agenda right through the consultation on the proposed programme for government. Is the recognition that there is a gap, and it has been a persistent gap over many, many years. Nothing has closed that gap, and therefore we have got to raise the standards from the very bottom. And if you look at the skills barometer and the identification of the skill needs of Northern Ireland going forward for the next 10 years, clearly we are going to have to increase the access to education of those who are at this current time underachieving through education. The number of jobs that are going to be available to people with qualifications less than level 2 has already dropped from 22% to 16% since 2011, and that trend is downward. So therefore, the demands from our education system for better quality outcomes and a broader range of skills, which means looking at the curriculum that we offer and matching that curriculum offer to what the needs of a forward-going economy are, so that we have a future being created. And that future isn't going to be the same in Fermanagh as it might be in Belfast. So we've got to look at the local potential and use education as a driver of change, both for the economy and society in those areas.
Yeah, through the Fermanagh Learning Community.
And
Yes.
and others, yeah.
Thank
Jennifer,
you, Chair.
No problem. I have two further contributors, Jennifer and then Morris. Jennifer.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I'm not going to labour the West Belfast area plan because I'll talk to you. I've been talking to you about that, but just to give me a sense of when you think it will be, because I'm hearing that you're saying the area plans are being implemented stage. So, but I mean, I don't want. That's not my main sort of question. You can answer that in the whenever.
Absolutely.
I just think, just in terms of what you were saying, in terms of it has to be centred around the child and around, the development of the child instead of the school and the building and everything else. And I totally agree with your analysis on that. And I mean, even in conversations I've had with some of you before, I think that there are other bigger issues are, and I see it in your programme for government, the paper you give us. Just a lot of criticisms are in terms of not tackling the bigger, wider issues of inequality disadvantage and poverty and that. And I think you're quite right in those issues. And I know particularly in my own constituency of West Belfast that probably one of the most deprived areas, but yet the educational attainment has gone up. But we could actually get it even higher. We're not letting the young people reach their full potential there. Even, we could get it up even higher than that. And I think that a big part of it for me is the sort of the links with the community sector in that area is quite strong, particularly with some of the schools, and the school principals very open to bringing that in the Easter schools, and the tutorials and that the kids are getting is actually bearing fruit, if you like. But I suppose my question is, how do you change the big issues? How do we get, because we've talked about this and you're saying that the gap's still widening, and, how do we get to a stage where we're actually making meaningful sort of contributions, if you like, in terms of what we can do as a committee even, and in terms of what we can do? How do we actually get to doing that? Is there a plan there that you would have, in terms of that, and how, as I said, because the curriculum is a big thing as well. I agree with you about the school curriculum. I think the school curriculum has been a curriculum that's been there for X amount of years and isn't taking in the whole change in society and everything else. But how do we do it? I think that's my, my point, because, and as I say, I'd like to concentrate on the big stuff as well. The West Belfast Area Plan, I'll talk to you in a private session about that, but just how do we do it, I suppose?
Well, we sent you that paper on the programme for government. That was a paper which the council produced because it wanted to answer some of those questions. And yes, there is criticism in it, and the criticism is that all of the programmes for government that we've had have been short-termist. They were not looking at the structural weaknesses, and that they had narrow targets. I mean, one of the things about the current proposal for the programme for government framework is that the outcomes and the indicators need to be broader. And in fact, in terms of education, the indicator of 5 GCSEs is not the right indicator, because it allows us to work towards a target, which is a very narrow target. We need a much broader range of measures by which we can look at the success of our education system. But the paper is suggesting, and this has been picked up obviously, that it is an outcomes focus, which means that everybody has a role to play, dependent on the specifics. But education we would see as being at the centre of this, and it should not be a contested political area. It should be recognised as the means by which we transform our society through our economy. I don't think education should ever be seen as utilitarian, i.e. that we're there as a producer of skills of a particular type, but we certainly need a broad range of skills, and we need skills that people can flexibly use throughout their careers. So, the narrowness of the current curriculum, which is academically focused, has to extend, and I refer again to the skills barometer, which painted a picture of where the economy is headed, but it also painted a picture of an education service which actually isn't supporting that. And the downturn that we've had in pupil numbers in our system over the last number of years is now starting to work through to the workforce. So we either improve the qualifications of those in the system, or we have to import those skills from elsewhere. So there are big challenges here, and people need to see education at the centre. So my answer to you is that we utilise all of the resources of government, not just the departments, but the NDPBs, the funded community and voluntary organisations, that we create a vision for our economy and society that education plays a central role in delivering. And and they are in the draft, the framework, the aspiration to tackle inequality, to close that gap. And actually, there's been a slight closing this year, maybe because of the additional resources through the signature programme. But we'll have to see how that plays out. But that is still a massive gap. And there are issues of social differentiation here. There's a class issue which is more insidious in our education system than the religious difference that is often referred to. And as I've said, we are very willing to work right across the piece for all children, and we will make a significant contribution in every community to providing access to the curriculum, and that's our focus.
And could I just very quickly ask about the West Belfast Area Plan, just the implementation of it, when time frame or?
Well, I'll make one comment and then hand over to Jerry. I mean, I think this is a very serious issue. We have area plans that are very dependent on capital funding, and we may have to. I think West Belfast is a case in point. There are things that we need to change, which we don't have the capital funding for. So it's an iterative process, and I think Fermanagh is another example of that.
I suppose in terms of the West Belfast area plan, I mean, it's our intention, and we met a number of the schools this week and last week. It's our intention, as we had written to the schools, to begin the consultation on options as early as possible in the, September, October time, Jennifer. So that's quite open to meeting sort of members and giving them a briefing on that. That's not it.
Okay,
But again, it's delivery is an issue. In terms
Two further members, and we'll be brief. I'm sorry to do this on you again, Morris, and then Chris.
I think you're at it, Chair, with me today, all day. But anyway, we'll get back at you another day.
Long grass.
Yeah. Well, can I welcome you here? And I've listened carefully to what you've been saying, and I have been reading through the material. The KPMG report, the work that they did, I take it that you initiated that, for that to be done, or did you?
No. Internally, in the summer of 2014, we began to look at how we would shape ourselves up in the event that ESA wasn't delivered. Because at that stage we were beginning to strain under the lack of resource ourselves in terms of staff. Before we did anything, I contacted the department and just indicated that we would be looking internally at our organisation, and we were told by all means go ahead and do that, but the Minister is commissioning an independent review of your organisation. So that was led by the department, and the commissioning body was the department on behalf of the Minister.
So, right. So when that initial step was taken, then you said to KPMG, look, here's our books, here's what we are. Go away and make your recommendations in relation to the way forward for us to be better at doing what we're doing, I suspect. Is that right?
That's absolutely. We opened up everything to them. Yeah. We prepared what we call the narrative in advance of them coming in, where we collated a lot of our information anyway in terms of what it was we do. We went right down to business objectives and staffing, salaries, everything. How we used our finances, opened up the lot, and then they came in for 3 months. There was a team of them came in for about 3 months, and they evaluated what they saw in front of them, and brought us individually as staff, as council members. They engaged with our council members. They engaged with some of our stakeholders in terms of our other business partners in terms of the education and library boards, NICE and people like that. So they engaged with all of those and how they saw their interactions with us as well. So it was a fairly thorough root and branch review of our organisation, how we were governed, how we governed ourselves, how we accounted to the department, and then how we used our resources as well. And that's primarily where they made their recommendations around how we used our resources and how we staffed ourselves, because they saw that there was a significant imbalance in the way the organisation was structured now or then in 2015, as opposed to where we would have been had there been no RPA, where we would have had a much more professional voice and educational voice. We had lost a significant number of staff, downsizing in preparation for ESA, and we'd lost a significant number of those in around 2010, 11 and 12, and they weren't replaced. So what we were left with was an organisation of administrators, if I could describe them as that, and they were saying, no, we needed to refocus on our core objectives around raising standards, area planning and HR.
The work that KPMG carried out for you, did they make any recommendations in relation to how you could be more open, and, for instance, to a Protestant community? Or I'm thinking in particular, and you know the subject that's going to come, the Certificate of Religious Education seems to be a barrier to the other community applying for posts within your system. Do you take that point?
I know that there's the perception. Jim and I attended the previous committee on that issue, and yes, we do have a requirement for teachers in our primary and nursery schools to hold the religious education certificate, teacher certificate in religious education, prior to commencement of appointment. We have, over the past Assembly term, we did amend that slightly on the request of the trade unions, that we would look at redeploying teachers who didn't have it into our sector, who were made compulsorily redundant in other sectors. So we brought that to our council, and they were quite happy to do that. We are working with the Equality Commission in terms of developing our approach to an equality impact assessment on the requirement. We're in the final stages of having that drafted and ready to go for consultation. It is a requirement. We believe it's a necessary professional qualification. There's no requirement that people need to be a Catholic in order to obtain it. What we're maybe looking at is how do we mitigate that cold house or that chill perception? How do we mitigate that? How do we make it more accessible? Because there is an issue around accessibility at the moment, that those who don't attend within Northern Ireland, St Mary's or Coleraine, have to access it through correspondence course. And so we are talking to the institutions about how we might broaden accessibility. We're looking as well at the possibility of perhaps allowing people a period of time to obtain it once they're appointed, rather than making it a barrier to appointment, but to say, you know, if you are appointed, we would support and give you time to be able to attain it, and we're looking at building that into contracts. So those are a range of sort of mitigations that we're trying to get to open it up a bit. We believe it is a necessary and useful professional qualification, and we would welcome anybody doing it. And in fact, it is available to everybody currently, and it is available to the students of Stranmillis to do, albeit by correspondence.
Chair, I take a point fully that it is available to anybody and sundry, and I accept that fully. But the point that I still feel that it puts and to use your own words, and they were well made, it's a cold house. And sometimes, you know, in life, it's not what you are, it's what you're perceived to be.
It's the perception.
It's the perception. Now, and I see that you do hold tenaciously to it, and you say that it is an important, not maybe your words, but it is an important and necessary qualification. Mm-hmm. I have to ask you the question, straight back, why?
I suppose it goes to the nature and purpose of Catholic schools, and it's in how, I suppose, faith delivery is entwined throughout the curriculum in a Catholic school. So it's not related, you know, there is a perception sometimes that it is around preparation of children for sacraments. It's not just specifically that, it's about the whole ethos and nature of a Catholic school, and how faith is delivered and faith tuition is delivered throughout and across the school from children coming in. And that's not just Catholic children as well in Catholic schools, because we would say that schools are open to all children of all faiths and none, but it's the nature and I suppose it permeates the whole school ethos, and we believe that the certificate in religious education helps teachers be able to deliver and subscribe to that.
Can I just add to that? I mean, I mentioned to you that when CCMS came into being, that our performance in relation to outcomes for young people were behind all other sectors. We're now ahead. We would believe that the ethos and culture of Catholic education has contributed significantly to that. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that parents, you know, pick up some of Rosemary's points from earlier, make decisions about schools, and they make decisions for a whole range of reasons. And one of them is, and I think this is not unique to the Catholic sector, Maurice, people do believe that a faith-based education does add value, and that value is reflected right across the school, as Eugene has suggested. And the certificate is there to develop that.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't have a big problem with that aspect of it. But do you take the point that, I think it makes a person a better citizen if they are sometimes grounded in their faith? But can I ask you, is there any other, school section that says, well, look, you must have a particular qualification in?
Well, this is a certificate in religious education. Yes. It's not a Catholic certificate, as some people refer to it. But the option for schools to determine their their essential criteria for employment is open to any employer. The point that I would make is that each employer tries to identify those skills, qualities, etc., which are going to best contribute to the outcomes that they're searching for. And I think the important point in this discussion is that we want that high quality, but we believe that people from every background in Northern Ireland have the potential to contribute to that, and there is evidence of this on the ground. The fact that others don't do something doesn't mean that we should stop doing it, because I think we have a proven record of the value that that certificate adds. And it is worth noting that anyone engaging in the certificate, it's 120 hours of study over the first 3 years of their degree. So it's not just an attendance issue. There is actually a programme, and a very rigorous programme at that. And we would not want to give up quality here. But what we do want to do, and Eugene has made this very clear, we want to dispel that cold house. But a cold house is, as you rightly say, perception. And perception sometimes can be wrong. And the challenge for us, and indeed for all of you, is to help us break down that perception of cold house.
Final question, very quick, Chair. Did KPMG in their recommendations make any recommendations around this issue at all?
No.
Or they said there's quite acceptable?
No. Well, they didn't even look at it. No. Their review was around our functionality. It was around the organisation CCMS. Yeah.
Thank you.
Carla, are you?
It's just on the point, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come back in. And I do have some concern just around it, and I know you have indicated that it is perception, and Maurice has very adequately questioned you on it, but I still think more could be done. And you talked about your work with the Equality Commission, and the fact that you're even working with the Equality Commission would make me think, maybe in the wrong, that there is an issue, and that there maybe is a discriminatory issue that is out there. And I'm just wondering, have you taken legal advice on where you stand on this? Because I just am very conscious there's lots of good teachers out there who are actively seeking work. We know, we hear it every day, and I just feel that, you know, you seem to be the only sector that is permitted to put this kind of
If I could deal with the Equality Commission issue first. We are working with the Equality Commission as part of our affirmative action plan as well, in terms of dealing with the perception of chill house. But we work with the Equality Commission on a range of issues. It doesn't mean to say that there are... We take guidance from them. Like we've gone to them recently around how we might better respond to issues around disability, for example. We would be quite happy to take their views. We've consulted them on what we could do in terms of what our legal obligations are, actually, in terms of equality impact assessing it. We've consulted with them on that. And they were the ones that suggested that perhaps in doing the EQIA, that we should put in place a range of mitigations that might be open to people. They were the ones that suggested perhaps access to the course after people were employed. So we're going to put that in to see what people think, and they were the ones also that suggested that we should open up negotiations with other committee members or other providers to allow everybody within Northern Ireland access to it. The challenge around getting all teachers' employment is a challenge, I think, regardless of whether or not they have the certificate and whether or not they wish to work in the Catholic maintained sector. I do see that we have a significant challenge in getting tranches of new and young teachers into employment every year. And one of the questions earlier that was asked at the top of the table was, how do we change the system? And I think the key to changing the system is how we appoint our teachers, getting young teachers in, refreshing the workforce, how we appoint our school leaders. So I don't think that the certificate is and the requirement to hold the certificate is impacting on the employment issues across the sectors. We are open to having a look at how we might make it more accessible for people. We have never put a stipulation on it that in order to do it, you needed to be a practicing or a Roman Catholic of any nature. So we don't have that requirement. I suppose the challenge for us is to market it for people and to market its importance for people and ensure that they get access to it.
And can I take the marketing opportunity and say that very publicly on the record, we encourage people from every background to engage in taking the certificate so that they might be able to apply for our sector and contribute to it.
Chris?
Yeah, Chair, you've guillotined me quite significantly here today, so I had lots of questions. Maybe I could meet with you informally as well. That would be useful. I was going to ask you a positive question around what key CCMS interventions have contributed to improved educational outcomes for children, so maybe you could touch on that briefly. And a genuine question in relation to the certificate debate that we could probably allocate lots of time to. You mentioned faith delivery, so can you help me understand how faith is delivered through a nursery and a primary school curriculum? 2 questions, is that all right?
Well, I'll take the first one in relation to standards. And we rely on the measures, however inadequate they are. And I'm not claiming that the measures that we have in our system at the moment are necessarily the right measures, but on the basis of what is available to us, we have seen the improvement and the differentials across sectors, and I don't want to exploit that kind of situation, but I mean, the evidence is on the ground that we have been able to show improvement over the last number of years. I think the sense of confidence in schools to believe that they can improve has been very important, and I think our strategies for appointing leaders in our schools have been significant. We do, I think, have a challenge at the moment because right throughout the education sector, the professional development aspects are being quite limited. And, you know, we do have a general concern, and Eugene has hinted at it, that we need to look very carefully at how we recruit because the nature of our schooling going forward is going to be much more complex. So training and preparation for that are vital. And having teachers who can deliver a modern curriculum and, you know, the transforming the workforce here is very important, is important to raising standards. And we believe that over the last number of years, by challenging schools that we're coasting along, that we have been able to accelerate progress. Eugene, do you want to take the second?
Well, just in relation to, I suppose, the faith delivery aspect of things, there is a perception, I suppose, that the only faith delivery in primary schools is around, in Catholic primary schools, is around preparation for sacraments at the end of Key Stage 1 and the end of Key Stage 2, communion and confirmation. That's not the case. I suppose the faith delivery is interwoven through just about every aspect of curricular delivery in schools, and it is the nature of Catholic schools that would happen, that really that's where the fundamental difference is, and that's why we argue that the teacher's certificate in religious education equips a teacher, no matter where they are in a primary school, be they a foundation stage teacher or a P2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it happens to be, that they do need to understand the tenets, the basic tenets of the faith and how they impact and weave into curricular delivery.
Catholic faith?
The RE certificate is much broader than the development of the Catholic faith. It has comparative religious dimensions to it, right from the primary sector up. So it is about faith development and faith development in the Catholic ethos. And I think I would use the word development rather than delivery.
Okay.
Quickly, Chair. Well, yeah, I suppose there's a lot more there to get into at the end of the day. Try and meet with you to discuss some of them.
If I could use a practical example, just in terms of faith delivery. My wife is a primary school principal, a small rural primary school, which is open to all faiths, and she would be quite proud of that. And she makes provision for that faith development for all of those children, irrespective of their religious background.
But just on that, sorry. Yeah,
can I go first, and then how do you I'm just slightly confused in terms of the Catholic ethos and culture being key to contribute to the outcomes and aims, but then at the same time there being an argument that it encourages development of all faiths. How does that be balanced?
It recognises all faiths, And we would regard faith as an important aspect of the development of the human character. And I think Morris in his comments has recognised that. But we then develop it within the particular ethos of Catholic education. So it's recognising faith as a baseline and the additionality of the Catholic dimension of that, if you like.
Okay, I'm going to have to guillotine this presentation.
Sorry,
I would like it. I would like it to be lengthier.
I'm not
I
going to
would
be.
like it to be lengthier presentation.
Yep.
It's a very important contribution you made, and there will be ongoing engagement between ourselves, the committee, and the CCMS, and individual MLAs and the CCMS. Thanks very much for your engagement today. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
So, Chair, committee can tend to write to the department just to seek an update on the certificate in religious education. Something that the predecessor committee has written.
Yep.
See what the position is.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, and in correspondence, the clerk's going to assist me in how to dispose of this in a composite way. Okay.
So, Chair, at page 294, you'll find an index of our incoming correspondence. Can I ask that members are content to dispose of it as per the index? Also, there's a number of tabled items. Taking you through those very briefly. Yellow tab. The first one is about area planning from Anamore School. Again, as the committee doesn't get involved in individual schools, and we will be dealing with area planning in the next session of content to note.
Agreed.
Okay.
Chairman, just on the area plan and this sort of stuff, will it be made available to at that time? I know, and I take the point, Peter, you're making. We don't get into individual issues, but sometimes it can help to stimulate a debate while not dealing with a specific. So it can. But will these sort of papers be made when we're going into that more concentrated debate on the area plan?
If you see the area plans themselves, we'll have those. They will set out, say, Dungannon. There will be a plan for Dungannon, and the schools, you'll obviously know the ones. And so what members might want to do is challenge the department and the Education Authority on their policy issues, and I'm sure informed by the constituency experience. So short answer is yes.
And Peter, Chairman, is there any chance of getting that area plan just a wee bit ahead of sometimes we get this, or is that not possible?
I don't have them. See, this is
no, I'm not blaming you.
No, I was really interested by what CCMS said there, because DE said the area plans, I thought they said were going to be issued in July. Then I understood that was going to be for consultation. But then CCMS said, no, it'll be October. So I've asked the department to come and brief in October, and perhaps in their reply they'll explain to me what the actual timescales are. So,
through the chair, do maybe CCMS have a separate area plan
no,
for
there was
their
supposed to be a whole no, they're all supposed to be at the one time. That's what happened the last time, but that's not supposed to happen.
It's not
this
supposed
time.
to, right?
So okay,
I'm not contradicting you. I'm just thinking there.
Indeed, that is indeed what they did, and that was criticised by the committee in the previous mandate. So, still in the yellow tab, on tabled items, we have restricted correspondence regarding serious allegations around child safeguarding, and then you can see there's a bit of a narration there. So there's a narration, allegations made, and allegations then modified. Again, committee doesn't involve itself in individual schools. What I would suggest, Chair, is that the clerk could write to DE and CCMS to ensure that the proper child safeguarding procedures have been followed, and I will even take further advice to see if anything else may be necessary.
I think that is necessary for you to do that. It is necessary for you to do that, I think. Just the vulnerability of us all, members and the committee. Okay, thank you for that.
Also at the yellow tab, next one along is Nikki, who this is the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People, are seeking an informal meeting with the chairperson, so I can ask if the committee are content for the chairperson to undertake the meeting, diary permitting.
Content.
Then we have Antrim Grammar. They were inviting the chairperson to attend its finance committee meeting on Monday 5th of September. Again, if members are content for chair to permit his diary permitting. Agreed. Then we have also a petition about Killard House School. Members are content to note.
Note. Okay.
Then we have from the Education Authority correspondence just setting out their structure and various other matters. So content to note that.
Content to note.
And finally, Department of Education has sent a commencement order. This relates to the Special Educational Needs and Disability Act. There's no assembly procedure, so even if members didn't like what it said, there's nothing the assembly can do about it. All it does is it commences powers relating to the Special Educational Needs and Disability Act. And as we talked about earlier, the regulations which relate and the draft code of practice are expected to come before the committee in the autumn anyway on this subject. So if you're content,
yep.
And that leads us then
I'll move into any other business, and I'm presuming that there isn't any other item of business. Chris, okay, what a man. Thanks, Chris. That was real bad.
Can I just under one?
Okay.
I'm not going to hold you. I actually think we're we're packing so much into this that those people went off sort of there today as if we were glad to get them out of the way, and we continued on with business, and they sort of looked. Do we wait? Do we stay?
Chairperson, just to advise members that they need to be careful how they use their time.
Yeah.
There's a long matters arising debate which you're probably going to have again next week.
That's right.
And members may wish to, and as a consequence, important issues around certificate of religious education, other matters then got guillotined. So it's for members, goodness help the chair, but it's for members to use their
I'm
time.
going to be a bit
well.
more ruthless from now on. See, I'm going to fall out with people. Okay. Is that all right?
Yeah. Bringing out your nasty side.
4 or 5 weeks, I've had enough. But no, I'm going to be a bit more ruthless in the number of questions and supplementaries that are allowed to be asked. I gave a lot of latitude in the first 4 or 5 weeks, but I'm going to curtail that probably. Okay.
No, that's
Thanks. Okay. And the next meeting then is Wednesday, the 6th of July at 2 p.m. in this very room. And okay, that the meeting is now adjourned.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.